Melissa Ann Trumpy was a 37-year-old from Monroe, Wisconsin. She was the mother of 3 and took care of a quadriplegic friend. On October 26th, 2021, Melissa drove to Shannon, Illinois to break up with her violent boyfriend. Melissa's rented truck was later found not far from his house. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Dunsel, and this is Unfound. One of the most agonizing parts of doing this podcast as a straight guy is hearing the stories of perfectly fine women who made bad choices on men. These women with no addictions or mental health issues could have virtually picked any other type of guy with whom to share their lives, and they'd still be here, living, working, laughing, loving. Instead, they decided that these men were for them, and that was that. And yes, I realize at least some of them might have been afraid to leave. Yet, I will admit, I think many of them stayed by choice and not by force. Who are some of these missing women featured on Unfound? Lonnie Rogers, Julianne Gillet, Christy Nichols, Tiffany Johnson, Unique Harris. And that's just a very short list. Very normal women who had psychos in their lives. Well, with Melissa Trumpy, it might not be as straightforward as those others, but she had a perfectly fine guy in her life. But instead, she chose another and was taken hostage. And now a summary of the case. Melissa Trumpy had many chances to live a solid and quiet life. She was a hard worker. Melissa had a seemingly bottomless heart, caring for a friend who was a quadriplegic. She was popular with men, but in a tasteful, not look-at-me way. Melissa, despite the problems she had later, was a great mother. But eventually, things began to slip away. Her first marriage failed. Then Melissa met a guy who pretty much worshipped the ground she walked on. They had 2 kids, but Melissa started on a drug addiction, which was with her till the day she disappeared. On top of that, Melissa cheated on this guy with a man who eventually, most likely, caused her to go missing. So, on October 26th, 2021, seemingly, Melissa had had enough. Leaving Monroe, Wisconsin, she went to Shannon, Illinois to break up with that guy, Derek Hammer. The GPS on the rented truck she drove, when checked later, said Melissa made it to his house. Derek has had nothing to say about Melissa at all. She was never seen again. When the investigation eventually started, the overall picture created from that GPS information, a video from a nearby airstrip, and multiple 911 calls from Derek's mother that same night, seemed to show one in which something violent happened to Melissa, with a preceding cover-up by multiple people. Yet, no one has been charged. Our society, at least here in the United States, does a lot to try to help women get out of abusive relationships. Likewise, a lot of counseling has been done with men to make them understand that abusing women in any way is always wrong and will always be wrong. Yet, these kinds of problems continue to happen. Contemplate if we're really going about the job of ridding the world of abusive adult relationships the right way, while you also try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, how can people who had nothing to do with a relationship at all get so easily wrapped up in covering up the abuse and even a death in it? Number 2, would passing a law making it impossible for killers to leave prison if they don't reveal where their victims are have any impact on disappearances at all? And number 3, How can we all call our society civilized when a career criminal like Derek Hammer, even when excluding Melissa's disappearance, will be let out of jail in 2031? Melissa's friends and family are all convinced that Derek Hammer knows exactly where Melissa is. The guest for this episode is Melissa's ex-boyfriend, Benny. Unfound news. Regarding Yesenia Norman, the young woman who was to be the newest Unfound Now episode, but was found murdered first. Her killer has been extradited back to Arizona from Louisiana. Next, although we've not yet picked out a particular week, the disappearance that John Lorden and I will be featuring together is getting closer and closer to public consumption. Finally, nothing makes me happier than prior guests who I haven't heard from in a while calling me up out of the blue to ask about new ways to move their investigations forward, as has happened recently. I feel so special that they respect my insight that much. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the ex of Melissa Trumpy, Benny. Benny, welcome to Unfound.
Thanks for having me on here, Edward. I really appreciate it, and appreciate you sharing Melissa's story on a wider scale.
You're very welcome. Let's start here, and everybody should know that we don't often have many Bennies, or I should say many exes on Unfound, but I can assure all of you that Benny is not a suspect in this disappearance. In fact, you're going to find that Benny is one of the most committed people trying to figure out what happened to Melissa and bringing, her disappearance or whatever happened to her to justice. So I just want to make sure everybody knows about that. But Benny, just talk a little bit about yourself to start. What do people need to know about you personally, as much as you want to say?
Well, I'm the father of Melissa's two youngest children. She has three beautiful, beautiful kids, and my daily life is being a single dad because I am the parental figure that my children have, and that's been tough. It's just been tough being being a single parent, and then the circumstances really surrounding why I'm a single parent, and the holidays are difficult, birthdays are difficult. October is our most difficult month. We have two birthdays, my daughter Josie's birthday, and then a few days later is actually Melissa's birthday, and then at the end of the month we have the anniversary of her disappearance. So it's it's just changed. There's a lot of things that changed in the past 4 years, and it's been a rough 4 years, and kind of feel like we not having any closure. We're just stuck in limbo, and it's been really hard to just advance anywhere in life past the point of 4 years ago when Melissa disappeared, because she hasn't even had a funeral, and the kids have never had a chance to say goodbye to her, and I think it's really unfair. I just think it's unfair as it gets.
Okay. Let's start here. Being that you are the ex, obviously you have two children together. Once again, now that Melissa is missing, of course the burden's on you to raise these kids, but let's start here. How did you and Melissa first meet? How did that all come about? I realize it's been some years, but how do you remember it now?
Melissa used to bartend in Edgerton, Wisconsin. Actually, Indian Portage is right next to Edgerton. It's so small, most people don't even know what it is. But she bartended at a bar, Bubba D's, and I would go out there sometimes, and I talked to her a few times, and then it was about a year later after I first talked to her. I was just out there, celebrating. I think it was Memorial Weekend. I believe it was Memorial Weekend, and she was out there celebrating. I was celebrating, and started talking, and kind of developed a relationship from there. And we spent almost 10 years together.
Wow.
And had our 2 children, and then she's also the mother of Delana, and she is the oldest from Melissa. Melissa was previously married before her and I were together, and then myself, I was very previously married, but I didn't have children from my previous relationship. Melissa and my kids are my first. I had them pretty late in life. I had my first at 37 and 39.
Wow.
But Delana was 4 when I met Melissa, and that's her oldest child. And by the way, Delana is just an amazing, amazing young lady. She just super athlete, super person, just super good, amazing big sister to my children. And another child that doesn't deserve the really like any of this, just so it's been
Would you say, looking back with Melissa, love at first sight, or was this did she take a while for you to convince her that you were the right man for her? How do you remember that now?
I still love Melissa, despite the fact that we split up, and, we actually split up over Derek. But the way I love Melissa is that unconditional love, like you love your kids, and even if you have an estranged relationship with your children, you still love your children, even if you have, a difficult relationship with your children, the love is just there. It's just that natural. And sometimes, especially when it's not your kids, you can understand that sort of bond. But when you have unconditional love for another person, and another, I think that, she was attracted to me, and, and then, I don't know, I'd say that Melissa probably felt the same way about me that I felt about her, to say, I love her unconditionally. And not to say that, she had 2 children with me. It's not to say that she didn't love me, but I don't think that her feelings 100% and my feelings matched. And, we stayed in the relationship for a long time with the kids, I guess, to say, like, children with somebody, that it makes it hard, and you always want to try to make things work, even when they don't seem to be working, or when you have when you're in a relationship and you're committed, and maybe your partner isn't quite as committed as you are,
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I love Melissa. Like I said, I love Melissa unconditionally, and I know even before our relationship, Melissa had a difficult life. She had a difficult childhood, and, not to make excuses for her, but that, as I can say, contributed to a lot of what was going on in her head, and she was a very good mother. She loved our kids, and even at I could say the worst, where she was struggling with like chemical dependency. Yeah. She always put the kids first. She was always there for them. spoiled them, and she did the best with what she had and what she could, I guess I should say. I mean, as human beings, we all make mistakes, and Melissa herself, she's made some mistakes, but at the same time, she deserved better than the outcome of the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And, yes.
Regarding your relationship, being that you brought it up, and once again, I'm not here to get into your personal life too, but regarding her, did this addiction appear early on in your relationship, or did she have it before you started, or how did that come about?
So, when I was with her, the thing is that I would say up until the very end of our relationship, the only thing Melissa would actually take chemical-wise was, she had ADHD, and she was prescribed Adderall from her doctor, and she took that, and I can't even say that I actually liked that, because I have ADHD, and as a child I was on similar medication, but to some extent, I think as an adult, I haven't taken it because I feel like it does affect your thinking, and it affects your, to some extent, your choices and character, and at the same time, the end of our relationship, so Melissa went to work, which, by the way, she always worked. She always kept a few jobs. And one job she worked at for, I think here, 20 or 21 years. And that was as the deli manager at a small local family-owned grocery store. And then she went, as another job, she went and she worked for Nicole Crooks. And Nicole Crooks was her childhood friend who had been a bad accident, I want to say her early 20s, and a beautiful girl, and she was in an accident and quadriplegic from the accident. So Melissa went to work for Nicole, and I can't say that they were good influences on each other. And Nicole, from experiencing that physical damage to her body, had developed a dependency on opiates, and Melissa, spending so much time with her, taking care of her every day, and Nicole being so dependent on Melissa, they developed a very close, even closer than their childhood friendship. They developed a very close friendship the last few years of, before Melissa disappeared.
Okay.
And at the same time, the chemical dependency stuff from Nicole ended up rubbing off on Melissa, and Melissa started using opiates, and she would try and hide it from me. But that's not something that is very easy to hide, And I'm not the world's most, I'm not a saint. I have a history of my own, but I've never, ever been okay with opiates, because I know too many people who have died from heroin overdoses, fentanyl overdoses. And it's just something, to me, it's like Russian roulette. And there were some arguments that I had with Melissa, because Melissa was handling these drugs, and I worried, what if, Nicole dies or something from an opiate overdose, and you get blamed for it, Melissa? What if, I just wasn't okay with it. And it actually was an area of, I would say, contention, between her and I. And I think that's actually a big part of the you know, between her and I, where she felt like she was living this secret double life, you know, and at the same time, like I said, she wasn't very good at hiding it, you know, and I wasn't okay with her using, you know, opiates. And I begged her to quit working for Nicole, you know, and unfortunately, you know, she chose Nicole. And so Derek Hammer, we were introduced to Derek Hammer.
Yeah, let me slow down. Let's just follow this outline a little more closely. And that's all good. Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
You know, when this was going on, did you ever talk to her about going to rehab? Of course, you have a couple children together. Did that fall on deaf ears? You know, how do you look back? Of course, it's been a while now. How do you look back on it now?
Absolutely. I did try and get her to go to rehab. I even got to the point of where I went to her family and begged her family for like one of those intervention style, you know, approaches that you see on the show Intervention or whatever on TV. Yeah. And I'm, you know, Melissa's got a problem and she's unwilling to admit it and address it. And she keeps lying, but she was coming home nodded out. And it's easy to see when a person is using opiates because, you know, when they're nodding out, talking to you, and it's, you know, it's just something that they can't, no matter how hard they try and hide it, it's just not something that is easily hidden, you know. Yeah. And her parents, I mean, just essentially just really turned a kind of blind eye, and really my pleas to get them to intervene, I guess, kind of fell on deaf ears, you know.
Right.
And I don't know. I sometimes I feel like maybe I didn't try hard enough. I don't know. It's, you know, I mean, I did try, but I don't know. You know, it's you can't force another person to stop doing something that they want to do. And you know, I think, you know, like I said, I think her and Nicole met to, you know, didn't know their character or whatnot, but they just weren't good influences for each other. And I wish that she would have separated herself from Nicole, you know, and not even just for the drugs, but for, you know, obviously for other reasons.
Right. And, okay. All right. So, you know, this starts happening. What year would this have been around? Just approximately. We don't even need to know a month, but what year approximately?
I would say from really probably beginning maybe 2017, getting worse, 2018 into 2019. You know, I would say that was the worst of it would have been 2018, 2019.
Okay.
She probably worked for Nicole for about 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know,
okay.
I just
a slow, steady decline.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, because it wasn't easy to watch her, you know, go downhill like that. It just was not easy to watch, you know, not easy to watch. The children have to, you know, see that. And I think Melissa's biggest problem was that she couldn't, you know, or didn't want to accept that she had a problem, you know. And
Okay. Is this what would you say, once again, it's been some years now, would you say this is what ultimately ended your relationship with Melissa?
I would say it probably is one of the biggest contributing factors.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, I feel like Melissa was living this double life. She'd go to Nicole's, and then, even though she was working for Nicole, I mean, she would stay at Nicole's as much as she could. It was like, it was almost like the freedom from, a home life with the kids.
Yeah.
And she'd go to Nicole's, and then she got to do what her and Nicole wanted to do, and
yeah.
That.
Okay.
It's just
right, and we have to remember, you wouldn't think, I mean, how do I put this? You wouldn't think, of course, Nicole is quadriplegic, which means she had no use of her arms or her legs, correct?
Yeah.
And still, she had this kind of effect. She couldn't physically control Melissa, but obviously, mentally, there was something emotionally going on there.
Yeah, I would say.
Wow.
She definitely had a hold on Melissa as far as influence,
mm-hmm.
and I would even go a step further and say some manipulation.
Yeah.
Because
right.
That, I can say this is that at the time I was actually in a lot better financial shape than I am now, and I bought Melissa all kinds of stuff. I bought her a Harley. I bought her a snowmobile.
Wow.
I bought her thousands of dollars worth of gold and jewelry.
Wow.
I bought a lot of stuff, and at the same time, I think that with Nicole, that there was some jealousy because she didn't have anybody doing that stuff for her. She had a boyfriend, and so I think Nicole started out on pills, with this opiate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But as her addiction progressed, she started dating a guy, and this guy was actually bragging. He came over. We were smoking some pot in my kitchen table, and he was talking about heroin.
Wow.
And I said, it was like, Melissa, you need to get away from Nicole and Danny, because that's Nicole's boyfriend, Danny. And he was talking about selling heroin, and I'm like, this is not okay. And I said, these people are going to drag you down.
Right.
And unfortunately, she just wouldn't listen.
Of course, you got to know Melissa really well before this happened. Is this some sort of, as you would probably suspect, Benny, we talk quite a bit about addiction and things, and certainly addiction and the business, marketing, and, all of that can contribute to disappearances. But do you see it as, was there like a weakness in Melissa's personality, the way she was brought up? Some, psychology in there, or what? What would you say?
I would say coping from a traumatic childhood.
Okay.
And, I know, whatever, I had a traumatic childhood. I went through, things the children shouldn't have to go through. But I can say this. I always knew that Melissa had been through worse, because I could at least, talking about it, I went through a lot of counseling, and even though I didn't talk about the things that happened to me as a child until I was an adult, and for years I didn't talk about it, when I did, it was freeing. Yeah. Melissa, the things that happened to Melissa, she couldn't talk about, and I would actually try and get her to open up about it, but it, I could just say that the drugs, I believe, were coping. Okay. And I believe that she coped in other ways, because I believe that the things that happened to her as a child led to her seeking attention from men, and the wrong type of men, because when men want you just for your looks or for this or that, they don't have good intentions, you know what I mean? And and I just, and like I said, Melissa is a good person. I don't want this to...
Nope. We get it. if there's ever an audience in the true crime community that understands all of this, it's the Unfound audience. So we get it. I want you to understand, Benny. People can be good people and still become addicts. And that doesn't, unfortunately, the drugs then make them do things they otherwise wouldn't do. But we certainly understand that. We get it. But I'm certainly happy that you're saying that. Certainly. So,
yeah.
I don't want you to think that you're, stabbing her in the back or anything. We just have to be very honest about these things, because through this, maybe we can, if Melissa, if she's not with us anymore or anything, well, there's still people out there that need to be saved, and maybe by talking about this the way we're doing this today, some men and women, young people, whoever, can be saved. Maybe.
I agree. And a part of what I think happened is, Melissa's living this double life, and Melissa wanted to do what she wanted to do, and she didn't like people questioning her. She was just she couldn't stand it. Her dad had come over and asked her if she'd been shopping, and it's like, she didn't want anybody. She get angry about that. Like, don't ask me what I'm doing. Don't ask me what, and that would be the same when I was confronting her about her drug stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that contributed to her seeking out people who were actually okay with that lifestyle, and those people don't care about you. Those people that, they may seem like a friend at the moment, buddy, or this or that, but in the long term, those people don't care about you, especially if they're okay with you, slipping down the hill and just watch you and partake with you and encourage that. They are not your friends, Okay. Unfortunately, Melissa couldn't see that, I guess,
Okay. So, Benny, for you, what was the final straw, and when did that happen?
Oh, well, that would come into the whole Derek.
All right. Let's start talking about him a little bit, how he came into the story, and then, of course, you and she were not a couple at the time of her disappearance, but I think we need to make sure everybody understands that. So please, let's get into the Derek stuff and how it came about. Once again, as much as you want to say, and then the final straw and what, went on from there.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, so, Danny was Nicole's boyfriend, and he, like I said, this guy was talking about selling heroin and talking about being the biggest dealer around, and I told Melissa, I warned Melissa, I said that, these, you got to get away from them. These aren't good people, and you need to, separate yourself from them. But unfortunately, she went the other way. And so Danny was from Illinois, and we live fairly close we're in southern Wisconsin, and we're fairly close to the Illinois border. And Danny had a friend, Derek, and I believe Danny had introduced Derek. Derek probably came over to see Danny at Nicole's house, and Melissa was there. And then, I'll be honest, I couldn't find, there was some pot at the time. I just say it up front. And Melissa told me that Danny's friend had not just pot, but a grow house, and we were invited over by Danny and Derek to Derek's grow house. I mean, it was the first time I ever met the guy in his marijuana grow house. Mm-hmm. And I got a bad vibe from him right off the bat. But at that point, they say you should always trust your gut. Yeah. And I bought pot from him a couple more times, and and he was talking about IV drug use and stuff like that, and asking me if that was something I was into. And I'm like, no, it's not my cup of tea, and I'm not really into that. I'm not okay with that. And so I knew that he had some major drug issues like that himself, and that was, I guess, what this crowd, people were into. And so Melissa started not coming home at night, and just, had some real lousy excuses for why she wasn't coming home. I knew, when something's up like that.
Right.
Just, the crazy thing is I knew pretty much it was him even before I knew. I guess that's that whole, your gut thing. And so she was pulling this disappearing at night. And I even had my dad came out and visited us from, he lives in Reno now. He moved from California to Nevada, but we hadn't seen him in years. And he was there for, I don't know. He was supposed to be there for like 10 days. He was there for 5 days. Two of those nights, and even I haven't seen my dad in years. 2 of those nights, she disappeared and didn't come home until the morning. And my dad, saw what was going on, and he actually cut his trip short and is like, okay, I'm out of here, which really kind of sucked because I hadn't seen him in some years. But, that was like when I really realized that, okay, this is a problem. And so with the last time, around the time we really had an issue about it, she hadn't come home until about 11:30 the next morning. And so I'm like, okay. I told her, I said, I'm leaving and I'm going to Nevada. Mm-hmm. And I even was calling her up and telling her, I'm like, okay, I'm in Iowa, I'm in Nebraska. But I wasn't. I was my boss had a little cabin at a lake here, Yellowstone Lake. And there's a campground it's really just more like trailers or whatever. But I stayed out at my boss's, campground, and my boss's wife and his daughter happened to drive by my house, and Melissa's telling me, she's like, oh, come back, and drive by my house, and there is a strange vehicle in my driveway, and they took pictures of it. So, the next morning when I woke up and I saw these pictures, I was like, the F, and went and was pretty upset about it and talked to Melissa, and of course she tried to deny it at first. But
so you pulled a little bit of a scheme on her and caught her, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right, Benny? Sometimes.
Oh, I can say I probably, lost my cool.
Yeah.
Not so much with her, but I went and I damaged the garage at Derek's Sweet House, and probably a good thing that he wasn't home that day because,
okay.
But at the same time, I didn't want this heroin addict around my kids, and he was actually at my house, and I just don't know. I didn't respond to it very good, and I damaged his marijuana house garage, and the cops ended up getting called by his neighbors. Somebody came by, and his mailbox too, actually backed over his mailbox when I was leaving, and his mailbox was out in the road. So somebody called the cops, and they came and they busted him with a big. He wasn't there, I don't think, but they could smell his weed from outside when they were looking at his garage.
Yeah.
So they got a warrant, went in and found a big marijuana grow operation and busted him for that. Of course, at the time, he was on parole from Nevada, which kind of, felt like he should have gotten taken back to Nevada on parole, but somehow it's one of these Derek Hammer moments where he slips through the cracks, which seems to be.
We're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
For sure.
I got some probation for damage to property or whatnot. And then he was in jail for, I would say, maybe 2 months before his family came in and bailed him out on the marijuana grow house charges. And during that time, Melissa was like, "Okay, we're going to work this out. You and I are, apologetic, or seemingly apologetic." But as soon as Derek got out of jail, she started pulling the disappearing act again, and then she just did it one night, and I was like, I just had enough, and took some, basically, like, I took like some family heirlooms from the house, and I left all the furniture that I bought, because I didn't want to take it from my kids. I didn't, I left vehicles that I'd purchased. I just gave them to Melissa. She was driving them. Anyways, escaped. Pretty much left almost all of everything except some family heirlooms that I had and antiques and stuff that I inherited, and I put those in storage and moved out. And it was probably like it's one of the hardest things that I've ever done.
I'm sure.
And it's difficult watching my family just like, being split apart. And I was also very close to Melissa's daughter, Delana, and that was hard. And I love her. We still have a relationship, but it's never been the same. We were like the family that did everything. We lived out on a farm. We had a bunch of snowmobiles. We had off-road dirt bikes. I had a big collection of dirt bikes at the time, and it's like that. Pretty much that all changed then. And just moved out. 2 weeks later, Melissa moved Derek in the house. I actually tried to begged her not to. I said, give it 6 months, give it a year, and if things are going good, why don't you think about it at least 6 months? Really, it should. But she moved Derek in, and I could tell you instantly, the kids were terrified of him, pretty much right off the bat. Mm-hmm. They were the first people to pick up on the bad, other than myself, really, to pick up on the bad vibes, and including Delana, so it wasn't just my children. And then Derek basically manipulated Melissa so much that he isolated her from her friends, and eventually, as Melissa's family kind of figured out who Derek was, then he actually isolated her from the family, and they were kind of out, and of course it's out on a farm, in southern Wisconsin, and she had a 20 plus year, friendship with her boss at the grocery stores, him and his family, and that went downhill. And he just basically controlled her. The drug use got much worse. I don't even think it was at that point in time, and it wasn't just opiates, heroin or whatnot, but crystal meth and cocaine.
Oh my goodness, Benny.
And my kids were there. So I had 50-50 custody at that point. We just kind of like agreed on custody in court, and it was 50-50. But, my kids were in this environment. They witnessed a lot of fights, and then they witnessed Derek overdosing. So he overdosed on heroin in front of the kids at their house. Melissa herself told me about it and said that she was doing CPR on him, and he was blue and not breathing for 10 minutes. And somehow the paramedics that she called came, and they narcoed him a few times. And the way she described it too is they raised him from the dead, and
so she told. So I have to just jump in here. So she goes with Derek. All these things are going, and then she's just freely telling you. Here the new man in her life is overdosing, and she's just freely telling you about this, even though she screwed you over.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Because she knew the kids were going to tell me anyways.
Yeah. Okay. Good point.
Better.
Very good.
Better.
Gotcha.
In her eyes to explain it herself.
Okay.
Have the kids explain it, and at that point in time, and like I said, the kids were telling her that they were scared of him.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she ignored a lot of that.
And how old were your kids at the time?
So Mateo was this is from the time he was 5 to 6. They were together for a year and a half.
Okay.
5 to 6, and Josie would have been 6 to 7 because she's 18 months, a year and a half older than Mateo.
So certainly old enough to know something's going on, right?
Yep.
If they were 2 or 3, maybe not. But by this time, yeah, certainly.
Well, it didn't take long before even, Melissa's parents were talking to her and I don't know about this guy, Melissa, and maybe you should. And he was throwing fits. I mean, at children's birthday parties. Even my son accidentally got him wet. They had a pool in a hose. My son got him wet, and this is one of the first time that I don't know if it was Melissa's sister and a couple other people had met him. And my son got him wet with a hose, and he got so mad he took and he threw a chair up against the side of the garage, And so he had some really just psycho tendencies, I guess, Okay. I mean, a child gets wet with a hose, and to respond like that, just, definitely not normal.
So at what point, hearing all these stories, overdoses and chairs being thrown and everything else, did you take steps to get your kids out of that situation?
So Melissa and I were talking about Derek a lot.
Yeah.
And somebody, I think that's a friend of Nicole's, a mutual acquaintance, had said, he did some messed up stuff in Nevada, and something violent. And they didn't even really know much about it to explain it. And so I asked Melissa, I said, what the hell did this guy do out in Nevada?
Yeah.
And she said, don't worry. His mother explained it all to me, and it was all a misunderstanding. And he was trying to make sure that his girlfriend took care of her kids. If you are familiar with the Nevada situation, it is actually one of the most crazy things I've ever been heard of, to be honest. And Derek's mother had, given Melissa this narrative that he was trying to make sure his girlfriend took care of some kids. She made him out to be some sort of hero to children. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's the right time to talk about
we're not. We're just going to stick to this disappearance. All I'm concerned about is, did you eventually take steps to take that 50-50, that 50% that Melissa had of your kids away due to all of this.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just stick to that. When did that happen, and how did she feel about that? What went on?
They were together for that year and a half, and then I was just say like a month and a half. Because Melissa would just always try and smooth things over when I would address what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And, well, it's all right. No, the kids they're blowing it out of proportion, and they're scared of him. What do you mean they're scared of him? He's a really nice guy, and
okay,
this and that. And just not really. I don't know, like just in denial.
For sure. For sure. So what'd you do, Benny?
Well, a month and 20 days before Melissa's disappearance, she called me up one day and she's like, CPS is going to be calling you. And I'm like, about what? Mm-hmm. And she said, well, Teo went to school and told a teacher that Derek threatened me with a gun. And so she tried to really deny how it happened or what happened. But, it ended up coming out. And so Derek had assaulted Melissa with like a kitchen spoon or a spatula, of course, in front of the kids. And he was screaming about some pills he couldn't find. And assuming Melissa took them, he decided to assault her in front of our children. And then at the end of the assault, he took a shotgun and threatened to shoot her with it. And in front of my son at the time was 6. And he went to the school and told a teacher the next day, which I give him a ton of credit for. And, for a 6-year-old child, I don't think that's really an easy thing to do, especially when they were terrified of him, And Derek is just a kind of a strange-looking figure to begin with. It's the whole, being intimidating and whatnot. This guy literally shaved every single hair off of his body, including his eyebrows, which I thought was, to say it's a red flag, I think, it's just kind of bizarre.
It's not like he's a professional swimmer, right?
So Delana, at the time was about maybe 14. So her friend, Cadence, was over at the house with Delana. And she asked Derek, and so when I met Derek, I literally thought that he was an albino. Oh, and I thought maybe his eyebrows are just so light you can't see them.
Yeah.
Cadence asked him, she's like, why do you shave off all the hair on your body and even your eyebrows? And he said to this 14-year-old child, he said, it's so I don't leave DNA. That is actually what he said.
Oh, well. That's what would be going on in my mind. That's what I was thinking. Even when we brought this up the first time we spoke, Benny, that's what I was thinking as well.
Yeah, and that's what he told this kid. So that's how scary and just creepy, really, of a person he is to children. Okay. And so my son reported the gun incident. Mind you, they came to the house. When they come for Derek, they're not sending 2 uniformed officers to knock on the door. When they come for Derek, because of his history, his criminal history, which is nuts, a SWAT team needs to show up when they come and pick him up. Mm-hmm. And so that was like the first SWAT team in a month and a half that picked him up. And I had a friend happened to be driving by, and he said, what the hell is going on out at your old place? He said, there is helicopters out there. It looks like the military's out there. And I was like, so, that explained what Melissa was talking about with the CPS. And she called me up, she told me about it, and tried to kind of smooth it over, which is, I think at that point, she should have just really cut her ties with him right away. So at that point, you asked about the custody, and that is the point where the Greene County Human Services, which is like family services, helped me fill out all the paperwork to get custody. We were going to take custody anyway, so they came out to the house. They found like 3 guns, included with they found his fingerprints all over these guns and DNA, and then they found drugs, and they felt that the kids were in danger, so Melissa got some criminal charges along with Derek.
Wow.
And mind you, I do want to state for the record here that Melissa, these are the first criminal charges in Melissa's entire life. Okay. And she got these criminal charges as a victim of a crime. The police came because Derek assaulted her and pointed a gun at her, and when they came out there to address that, they found these drugs, and they figured the kids were in danger. So she got charged with child endangerment and drug possession, and I think like maintaining a drug dwelling or something. And so at the same time, being a first offense, she wasn't looking at any sort of major jail or prison. Wisconsin, for a first offense, is actually fairly lenient. You're getting some probation, just to say it like that. She wasn't looking at jail or prison time. And on top of it being a first offense, when she goes in front of the judge is also going to recognize the fact that the only reason she got arrested is because she's been victimized. So a lot of people have been like, she's got a criminal record, and this is even
you don't have to, Benny, you don't have to defend her. We get it. I think we understand. I think we understand that. Certainly she's obviously in this first part of this interview, she's done some things she shouldn't have done, but she is certainly the victim here. Certainly. So you get eventually get control of the kids, or what, or not, or did she fight for custody, or what?
3 or 4 days later, and she to say she fought for custody, she was trying to make sure that she had rights to see them and this and that. But at that point in time, I think she really was starting to recognize that she did have a problem, and her mother was addressing it with her, and so everyone, including the judge, Melissa's ex-husband from before me, and we're all going to the custody hearing. We're all on the same page. So we want Melissa to get clean, and we want the kids away from Derek Hammer, and that was unanimous. Like I said, between myself and Delena's dad and the judge. Right. And nobody wanted to take the kids away from Melissa. We wanted Melissa to have a relationship with the kids.
Of course.
But we wanted her to get clean, and we did not want the kids around Derek anymore at all. And so that was actually, Derek goes to jail, of course. He's charged with the same stuff as Melissa, and then being a felon in possession of firearms, and he gets assault. Maybe I don't remember if it was assault with a deadly weapon, but he got quite a few charges out of that. I can't say that they gave him a huge, substantial amount of time, that he could have gotten 180 years out of that when he was actually sentenced. He got 5 years for that, but that's actually haven't really gotten to that point yet, because that was after this was already a missing person. So
okay.
he goes to jail, and of course his mommy, the enabler, who's just enabled this guy's criminal sprees his entire life, bonds him out for $10,000. And written in the bond was a protection order. It was a no contact order, and it said Derek Hammer is to have no contact with victim Melissa Trumpy or her children. And he also was, because his mother still lived in Illinois, and even though he'd been staying in Wisconsin at Melissa's house, at that point he's not allowed to have contact with her. So the judge had ordered him to return to Illinois. He wasn't even supposed to be in the state of Wisconsin anymore. He's supposed to be kind of, under his mother's supervision in Illinois. She bonded him out. And 2 weeks later, he's in a high-speed chase driving Melissa's vehicle. And probably because he didn't want to pull over and get caught, he's not supposed to have any contact with her, and here he is driving her vehicle. So he got in a high-speed chase, and he actually outran the cops. Then he went into he went from Greene County to Dane County, and when he got away from them, he must have blown out the radiator in Melissa's vehicle because her engine blew up, and so he was stranded, and he was out asking, jumped out of the woods on some kids and terrified them, because here's this alien looking with no hair, no eyebrows, pops out of the woods, and he's asking them for a ride to Melissa's house. And the mother of one of the boys told me that her son told Derek, he said, "I'm on Life 360. I can't give you a ride. My mom tracks me everywhere." And he was terrified. He mentioned that Life 360, I think, because, he was letting them know.
Right. Smart kid.
And so Derek, yes, absolutely. Then Derek proceeded to, shortly after that, steal that kid's neighbor's truck, I guess, and then drove that out to Melissa's house. And so then the police show up to talk to Melissa about her vehicle. They must have got her license plates on dash cam or something. And so they show up to talk to her about her vehicle in a high-speed chase, and they knew that Derek was driving it. And of course, she was protecting him and, saying, "I don't know, I must have left my keys in the car. Maybe somebody just took it."
Oh my.
And, protecting him.
Oh my.
And then they show up out there, and they find this stolen truck that he took from nearby of where he abandoned Melissa's vehicle when he blew the motor up. So Melissa, at that point in time, was trying to protect Derek, unfortunately, and she was ducking the police. They left after she told them, "I don't know who took my car. I left the keys in it. Maybe somebody just, she's out." The farm was out on a fairly well-traveled highway, and she's like, "Well, maybe somebody just walked by, took the vehicle or whatnot." So they left. But then they must have got these statements from these kids saying, it's this all weirdo with no eyebrows. And you're like, "Oh, good."
They know who that is.
Yeah. And so they started trying to talk to Melissa. They were going back. They basically were staking out her house and out at the farm and waiting for her to come home. Well, she stopped going home. She would go to Nicole's house to work, and then she would instantly, when she left work, she would drive down to Derek's mother's house in Illinois, and she was staying there.
So those two aren't supposed to have contact with each other, but she's on purpose driving down there.
Yep.
Oh my.
Yep. She was driving down there.
Okay, and I guess I also have to ask, so when he was driving her car and getting in these chases, then she was, I guess we would say, a willing participant in this, even though she wasn't in the car. He had her permission to be using her car, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, what a mess. What a mess.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So they ended up catching up with Melissa, and it was actually the day before she disappeared. She had one of these custody hearings. So we had a couple custody hearings. I think the first one we were given temporary custody. I think the second one we were given, both me and when I say we, the father of Delana, Melissa's oldest daughter, we were given pretty much full custody, not even on a temporary. And Melissa was given the ability to see the kids, but she had to do it with an observer. And so she was going to court. We had already I have to say, it's like putting in a plea. Now, this isn't a criminal case, but John, her ex, and myself had kind of already said this. Like I said, what we wanted. We wanted, Melissa to get clean, to go to treatment, and the kids away from Derek. So they gave Melissa a court date, and neither one of us had to show up at it. Neither John or myself. It was just a court date for Melissa herself. But Melissa's mother actually went to that court date with Melissa, and as I'm not really sure what happened at the court date, but they're probably telling Melissa what sort of hoops she needed to jump through and everything, and for the court. And as her and her mother were leaving court, two Greene County detectives grabbed her up, basically, and took her to an interrogation room. And they're like, "We want you to tell us the truth.
Right.
We know who was driving the truck, her SUV, and we just want you to tell us the truth." And Melissa didn't want to tell them the truth, and her mother basically yelled at her and was like, "Melissa, you are going to cooperate. You are going to tell them the truth. You're going to, And I guess she did, not to say one thing is, and this has actually been kind of really ugly, is that it came out in some media stuff, even in newspapers and stuff like that they said Melissa was a cooperating witness.
Oh boy.
But that is against Derek, and then you have people who are like, "Oh, snitches get stitches and she deserved it." People deserve to have something bad happen to them because they've cooperated. And it wasn't even like that. Because, Derek was getting Melissa in all this trouble. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She wasn't his criminal, partner or conspirator. He was doing all this stuff, and he was getting her in trouble. He was getting her children taken from her. She was getting her criminal charges for the first time in her really spotless, clean record of a life. And I think that's the point where she's like, okay, this is a problem. And so as Melissa was in court, I think Derek kind of probably had some sort of idea that the cops were going to try and stop Melissa at court, because he was calling Nicole "Is Melissa out of court yet? Is Melissa out of court yet?" And I want to say this, and I'm pretty sure that Derek's cousin, Stephen Dabkis, also called Nicole, asking about, "Is Melissa out of court?" and this and that. Derek, Nicole probably said something that she should have said, and I think.
All right, I just want to once again, at the time, of course, you're talking about it now, but for everybody listening, we're doing this interview on February 4th of 2026. But were you aware of all of this going on minute by minute, or is this stuff that you didn't find out till days later, months later? When?
Days. within a few days later.
Okay.
You know?
Please continue. So these people, I guess, they're worried about Melissa, talking and saying, yes, that was Derek with my car, and yes. They were worried about her saying, yep, that was him.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's like, this guy is a coward because go sit and go do a little bit of jail time. I mean, outrunning the police, I'm sure that's like, in the gist of things, would he probably do a couple years in jail? Sure. I mean, he's doing 5 years now for all of that and more. And only 5. I mean, he probably would have done a year or two, a couple years in jail and gotten out. But he couldn't do that, Yeah. And I think he saw Melissa as a threat to his freedom. And not only that, too, is like also the control, because he was so controlling over Melissa. Right,
we got it. All right. So they're talking, to your knowledge, being that they pulled her aside that day. Do you know what she said to them, or do you have a suspicion? Do you know, what did she say?
Well, I think her mother pressured her to tell the truth. I know it was like a couple hour long thing, and she really started out trying to say she didn't know who took her vehicle. She didn't know anything. She didn't, kind of played dumb in the beginning. But her mother pressured her to the point where she did finally just cracked and said, okay, it was him.
Okay.
And, the next day later, she's been missing since then.
All right. So after this, when was the last time you actually spoke to Melissa before she went missing?
Not that court, because neither me nor her ex John had to go to that one. Okay. That was just for Melissa.
Okay.
But the court date before that one was like maybe two weeks before that.
All right.
She hugged her outside of the court. She was a complete mess. She looked really distraught and really just she looked defeated. She looked, she looked sad, and
Okay.
And,
so you saw her like 2 weeks before this. That was the last time you saw her, talk to her.
You know what? I didn't tell you that right, because I did not hug her. I wanted to hug her.
All right.
And I didn't. And
Okay.
I wanted to hug her, but no, I did not hug her. I just said I did, but
that's all right. That's all right. That's fine, Benny. I'm just wondering the last time you spoke to her. That time you spoke to her but didn't hug her.
Two. I wanted to.
Yeah.
But 2 weeks before that.
Okay.
And then I don't know if it was a few days before that, her and her mother had stopped by and brought like some like duffel bags and like a garbage bag of like the kids' stuff from the house. Because the kids had just been kind of just ripped up out of their home and environment because of, what the gun incident.
Right.
And
right.
I am incredibly grateful, for that happening, because that's when I got full custody of them and they got out of that situation.
Okay. All right, so she talks to the cops. It seems that she was, of course, she went missing first, but it seems that she was going to cooperate with the police finally regarding these crimes and stealing cars and police chases and assaults and everything else that Derek was doing. And, but for some reason, and this is where the disappearance starts, I guess she decided to go see him, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, what she actually told Nicole was that, so she, the day before, Nicole told Derek Melissa had been arrested.
Okay.
But Melissa was not arrested.
Yeah.
So 30 minutes after Nicole is telling Derek that Melissa got arrested, of course, the police released Melissa from the interrogation room. And then shortly after, Melissa calls Derek. And, oh, you're not, I thought you got arrested, you know, sort of is what basically from what Nicole had said, you know, that it sounded like. And then, you know, I think that set his suspicion off because basically he felt like Melissa had cut some sort of deal to not be arrested, you know. And at the same time, I mean, in all of this, Melissa is a victim. And so the next day, and mind you, for these 2 days, Derek had been calling. And the next day, Melissa went down there. And I've heard that Melissa went down there twice that day. She went down in the morning, and then she went back and went to Nicole's for work. And then at Nicole's house at maybe like 9 o'clock or something like that, at 9:30, she went and got Culver's ice cream or custard, frozen custard for Nicole. Went back, got some food and frozen custard for Nicole, and then went back and gave it to Nicole, and then left. And then she went down to Illinois. She had told Nicole she was going to break things off with Derek, and she was going to get all her stuff, because that whole 2 weeks the police were trying to talk to Melissa. Melissa had been staying at the mother's house, you know, and had a bunch of her property was there, with clothing and stuff like that. So Melissa went down there, and the mother said, initially, mind you, the mother's done some backtracking too in grand jury.
All right, let's just set. How do you know what she said to Nicole? How do we know about this? How do you know this? Did Nicole tell you or what?
Oh yeah. So
though we should say something. Nicole is not with us anymore. She is deceased now.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So you were able to speak to her about all of this after Melissa went missing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Just want to make sure. You know, when we start saying things that other people are saying and everything, we just have to I have to connect the dots to make sure that, you know, well, how did that happen? Okay, that's the only reason I'm asking this. I need to ask you, did you know, and did you have any inkling that Melissa was going to be going to Illinois to see Derek?
No. I knew she had court on Monday, you know, but I really, like I said, Melissa was very, I guess to say, secretive about the stuff that she was doing.
Yeah.
You know, I think the only time she really shared stuff with me is like when she maybe knew that the kids were going to tell me, you know, something the kids witnessed or something that, you know, that she knew that somebody else was going to tell me, so she'd rather tell me first, you know, but no, so that Monday, after she was questioned, the very next day, she, you know, like I said, went to Illinois that morning, allegedly that morning, and then came back to Nicole's. And then that night, she got Nicole food, kissed Nicole good night, and left. And mind you, so another thing is too, I don't know if I made this clear, but Nicole was incredibly dependent. When she got tucked in at night, she couldn't care for herself. So she had all these hours where nobody'd be there.
Right.
She was very dependent on Melissa to come back.
Right.
You know, the next morning. You know, and so Melissa left, and the next morning Melissa never returned. Okay. You know.
Now we have to. This is something important, though. Melissa, being that Derek took her car and wrecked it and everything else, she was in a rented vehicle.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Tell the listeners a little bit about this. A rented. I guess it was a truck. How long had she had it before she went missing?
She had a few days where she was without a vehicle, and she was, you know, after her vehicle. You know, this is like a 2-week period, I would say, from when her vehicle was wrecked. You know, and then she had a few days where she didn't have a vehicle. I know she'd been asking people for rides here and there, and even rides down to to Illinois and to whatever, be at Derek's place.
Mm-hmm.
And then she got the rental vehicle probably within that last week. Maybe from like around the 20th to the 25th, 26th. And it could have even been as little as like 3 or 4 days, but I'm not 100% sure.
All right, so she's in this rented truck, and this is going to play a big deal a little later. She goes in the morning, then comes back, then goes to Nicole's in the evening, taking care of her. Tucks her in, of course, as a quadriplegic, very dependent on other people. We all understand that. And then it is accepted fact that then she went to Derek's mother's house.
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
So now it's accepted on that. Do you specifically remember that day, what you were doing that day, or is that etched in your mind that day, or what?
Taking care of the kids, because at this point in time, I was solely responsible for them. So that day, and I didn't know that she was going down to Illinois. I had, when I would talk to her, she would call and she'd talk to the kids on the phone, and try to actually encourage that as much as possible. But I told her, don't, after the gun incident, I'm like, Melissa, you need to get away from this guy. And I told her, I said, this guy's going to kill you, Melissa. You need to get away from him. And, of course, and I wasn't the only person. I mean, her family was telling her too. But I didn't really know, what she was doing day to day. I mean, I knew she had like a schedule to keep with Nicole.
Right.
But after that, I had heard that the police were looking for her, though, about the high-speed chase. I was aware of that. But it just sounded like, she's ducking them. She's not at home, and they're staking out her house, essentially.
Okay.
But...
all right, but do you remember specifically that you're just taking care of the kids? Hey, you have 2 kids now. You have full custody of them. Right. You have your own life to live, right? This day that she seemingly eventually went to Derek's mother's.
Yeah.
Okay.
So...
All right, so let me now ask you this. When was the red flag? We're going to kind of do this like looking back. We're not going to go this like in the timeline as it happened. We're going to do like looking back at it like now. But what was the first red flag regarding Melissa being missing, as best as you can tell? She goes to Illinois, seemingly doesn't come back. What was the first red flag that when did you first hear that maybe she was missing? What do you remember about that part of this case?
The next morning, she didn't show up for work for Nicole.
Okay.
And Nicole's got nobody to get her out of bed. I mean, when she's in bed, she's in bed. Somebody has to put her in bed. Somebody has to take her out of bed.
Right.
And that was Melissa's job, And so, she pretty much right away got a hold of Melissa's mother. And then shortly after, and I'm going to say, it was as early as like noon or 1 o'clock. And the crazy thing is I had seen something on Facebook, like I said, we're very close to the Illinois border, so we see a lot of stuff, about Illinois. Right. Somebody had posted that there was a hostage situation on Facebook. I still have the pictures too. The guy, a photographer, actually took pictures, and it was essentially like the same thing that they did in Wisconsin when they came for Derek. It was like a military action. There's two helicopters. There's two different. There's like a blue one, and then like a white or gray looking one. Then there is those breaching vehicles that are almost like a tank. Yep. And then there is the guys that are dressed like they're in Desert Storm. And they were staked out all over. Like dozens of pictures this guy took. And he said, hostage situation, Shannon, Illinois. And I'm like, oh, that's where this Derek lives, And I still, at the same time, it might have registered that, you know, to me that he lived there, but it didn't really, like, so shortly after that, Nicole's boyfriend, Danny, the one, of course, that had introduced Melissa and myself, Eric, called and said, this is what he said, very first words out of his mouth. He said, bro, I think that Melissa.
Yeah, watch your language, please, Benny. I don't want to have to edit this all out. Just be very careful. Yes, it's a PG-rated podcast. That's all right. Please continue.
Okay. Yep, I understand. Well, that's, you know, essentially that's what he said. He said, okay. I need to take the first words out of it, bro. I think she did something.
Okay.
Bleep to Melissa.
All right.
You know? And I'm like, why? Like, why do you think, like, what's going on? And he said that he knew a guy named Ryan Stagger. And he said, Ryan, you know, because Danny's from Illinois too, and that's how he knew Derek from Illinois. So, and they all had played baseball, I think, for Eastland High School. And so this mutual friend of theirs, Ryan Stagger, had actually been over at Derek's cousin's house, and that would be a Mitch Hammer and his wife, Charity Hammer. So Ryan Stagger was over at Mitch's house, and into their house comes Derek's friend, Jason Niesman. And he's crying, and he's hysterical. And he's saying, something really bad happened. You're all going to hear about it. It's going to be all over the news. And saying, and he said this, he said, my two best friends are going away to prison for life. Wow. It's actually something he said to another girl that we heard about a few days after this, you know. And he told a girl the same thing. So he called this girl that is actually a neighbor of Derek's, Casey Woodard, and he said, this is before the SWAT team showed up. He said, don't even go out of your house. He says, it's really dangerous. You can't leave your house right now. And she's like, what's going on? And he's like, something really bad happened. My two best friends are going away to prison for life. And mind you, he said this to a couple people, my two best friends.
And who would be his two best friends? Derek and who else?
My personal opinion, this Jason Rhodes guy.
All right.
And he's a mutual friend of both of theirs.
Okay.
And if not him, which I 100% believe it's him, possibly Derek's cousin, Stephen Dafkis. And those two, possibly together, Jay Rhodes and Stephen Dafkis. So, you know, at this point in time, I'm like, well, I called Melissa's mother, and she's like, yeah, Nicole said that, you know, told me that Melissa didn't show up this morning. And I'm like, well, now Danny, Nicole's boyfriend, is saying he thinks something happened to Melissa. And so I told Melissa's, I got a hold of the mother, and I also talked to Melissa's stepdad, Gary. And I said, Gary, why don't we go out to the farm and see if Melissa's out there, you know? And so Gary had, you know, because Gary always had like a spare key. It's just like a emergency, you know, person. And so I met Gary out there, and he opened up the door, and we went in, and Melissa's place was like spotless clean, like always, because she is very OCD clean, where everything has to be in its right place, and nothing, you know, really looked out of order. And then, of course, you know, whatever happened to her happened down in Illinois. But at that point in time, I really started coordinating with Melissa's family, with Melissa's sister Mandy, and a lot of people just started. It came up just within a few days that, you know, it was on the news already. You know, there's a missing woman. There's, you know, Melissa's mother made the actual police report very quickly, just knowing, you know, hey, Melissa didn't show up for work. You know, they got a SWAT team out at her you know, boyfriend's house. He's been arrested. It was supposedly a hostage situation there, but Melissa wasn't found. in this hostage situation, which, by the way, they backtracked on that too. They tried to say it was just a warrant. We still have the Facebook pictures where it says hostage situation. They said Derek held his mother hostage and held some other family members hostage. So,
how did that situation get resolved that day? So, she's allegedly goes, we're pretty sure, once again, not totally sure, but pretty sure she ends up Derek at Derek's mother's. She goes missing, and then the very next morning, there's this hostage situation. How was that situation finally resolved?
Well, to begin with, so Derek's mother called 911. I'm going to say this.
We'll come back. We'll come back to that, Benny. I just want to make sure on the next morning, all these cops showing up. How was it resolved peacefully? Was there a shootout? What happened?
They locked down the whole area. The school was the Shannon, school was locked down, and they locked the whole area down. And it just, like I said, it looked like a military action. All these guys and gear, helicopters and stuff. So Derek didn't just come out right away. I think he was negotiated out of the house. I think I want to say, I can't give you a specific timeline, but at least an hour and a half, maybe closer of 2.5 hours, from 11:30, I believe, when they got there, to closer to maybe 1 o'clock when he surrendered, Okay. And so he came out, and they arrested him.
All right, so I just want to explain this for everybody the way best I understand. So about the time this guy's calling you about Melissa, this hostage situation is going on that finally gets resolved with Derek being taken into custody. This is all happening like if you were watching a movie, it'd be one of those split screens. When one's on the left side of the screen, this is going on the right side of the screen, this is going on. It's like that.
Yeah. I would say that when Danny called me, it was probably about an hour later, actually, than the hostage situation. Because I'd seen the Facebook posts, and then an hour and a half later, that's when Danny's calling me, and he's like, I think he bleeping did something to her, And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, just, and he told me that his friend Ryan had seen Jason Eastman show up at Derek's cousin's house and said, the hysterical too, and crying and hysterical and hyperventilating and so, and this guy's got some involvement too.
All right. All right. So we have this all going on. A lot of people suspicious that something bad happened, on top of the fact that Derek's being taken into custody. Now, the reason they showed up there was because of we have to make sure everybody understands this. The reason they show up and this hostage situation is created is because of Derek, the charges against him for what he did with Melissa's car. Your understanding?
No.
All right. So
I think that's what was said later.
Okay, but why do you think then the police showed up at Derek's mother's that morning and he finally gave up? Why were they there?
Because at about 4 a.m. in the morning, 3:30 to 4 a.m., 3:45, 4 a.m. in the morning, she started making several calls to 911.
Okay.
And and whatever she said, which they still are not releasing, and they claim it's an open investigation. Right. We can't. And people, like I said, multiple people, including media people and journalists, have tried to FOIA request those 911 calls, and they refuse to release them.
All right. All right, we're going to come back. We're still going to, everybody's wondering what they said. We're going to come back to that. So I just want to make sure we have to take this very slowly. This is very complicated. All right, so you already stated that her mother filed the missing persons report, of course, because she didn't show up at Nicole's. Yep. And, of course, there's still this rented truck that we need to talk about.
Yep.
And, how are you handling those next few days? Just handling them.
Well, so I had a roommate at the time, a very close female friend. and I lived with her. And she let me use her car, and she watched my children. And I met up with Melissa's sister, Mandy, and we went to Shannon, Illinois, Okay. And at this point in time, we've kind of gotten some little, like, minor tips. Nicole had already talked to the police at this point in time. So also, mind you, is that because that Melissa had talked to these Greene County detectives in Wisconsin the day before, Greene County, Wisconsin got very involved in it very quickly.
Right.
Because of that police interview the day before, or interrogation interview, whatever you want to call it. They got involved very quickly. And and her truck was found very quickly too. Her truck was found the next afternoon.
Right. Well, let's go right into that. We still have everybody's wondering, man, there's a lot going on here. We're going to cover it all. I promise all of you.
Yeah.
So let's just get into that right now. Of course, Derek gets taken into custody that day. Melissa is missing and seemingly got taken into custody because of these calls that eventually we're going to discuss those. But we made a point a little while ago of making sure that everybody understood this wasn't her vehicle that she took to Illinois. This was a rented vehicle. Let's talk about that rented truck first. Where was it found? What was the condition? Did they do any forensics on it?
It was at that point in time, fairly newer Toyota Tundra pickup truck.
Okay.
And it was found on Bolton Road, which is like the main road leading to Shannon from Freeport, Illinois. Which is like the closest major city here in Illinois. And Shannon is like it's tiny. It's like 900 people and just a very small rural farm community. And so her vehicle was found. I want to say what I'd heard, and I actually have talked to the guy that found her truck, is that he came by at on his way to work at 4:30 or so in the morning, and he saw Melissa's truck parked. And this is a very rural area, but parked off the side of the road in the ditch, kind of, and parked though. It wasn't crashed into the ditch or anything like that. And he right away kind of thought, something weird. He's seen at this point in time. He said that he saw individuals in the truck, and the taillights were on in the truck. And so later, he was on his way to work when he saw the vehicle, and he said he got a bad vibe from it right away. But then he's like, well, maybe they're hunting. It was late October. Yeah. He said maybe they're hunting. Maybe they're he didn't know. But he left work after working all day, and it was 4:30 in the afternoon or something, 3:30. I'm not really quite sure, but he drove back by. He saw the truck again, So then he called it in, and when the cops came, they also found a business card for the detectives in Greene County in Melissa's truck. Wow. And they found some of her stuff. So, and I believe at this point, because of the hostage situation and Danny's phone calls and everybody talking about, well, what's going on with Melissa because she didn't show up for work this morning. There's a goddamn SWAT team at Derek's mother's house. This Ryan Stagger guy called Danny and said, Jason Neesman is hysterical, saying something really bad happened, and we're okay, well, this isn't good. Something's obviously happened here. Right. And then I don't know if Melissa's mother had called Melissa in as a missing person before the truck was found or after, but I do know that when they found the truck and they found the Greene County detectives' the business card in the truck, that they really knew something was up. And that's when I think Illinois and Wisconsin started coordinating together.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How far is this truck found? Once again, since I've not been there, you have. In driving distance, how far is it from where the truck was found to Derek's mother's house?
Like, I'd say 12 to 15 miles.
Not close.
Nope.
Not close.
Pointed away from Shannon, like driving away from that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just parked in the side of the ditch right in front of this small creek.
All right, so once again, not wrecked, not hidden. It was just kind of sitting there.
Yep.
Okay. Any forensics done on it? Any signs of violence? What do you know about any of that?
The truck itself looked clean. They found some of Melissa's items, including like clothing that she was seen on video wearing at that Culver's restaurant the night before, and maybe I think at a gas station where she might have bought cigarettes or something.
Okay.
And so she'd been seen on video, and she was wearing like a black hoodie and like all those like Michael Kors boots or something like that, and so she was seen wearing those clothes the night before, and I think they found a lot of those clothes, like those same clothes that she was wearing in the truck, and like folded and not in a disarray or not.
Okay. All right, were the keys in it? Was it locked?
That part I don't know.
All right,
we
that's
didn't find out about the truck until after the truck had already been towed. But when we found out about the truck, we went to where they said that it was found at, and we did find personal items in the ditch that must have gotten kicked out, when somebody was getting out of the vehicle, makeup compact and a couple other little things, people found. And by this point in time, we actually have, I can't say that it was an actual search crew at that point, but we had Melissa's sister, some family friends, I think maybe even an aunt of Melissa's. And so, we were just trying to see. And then we asked the landowners around where the truck was found, can we search your land? We're looking, we figured the first place to start, looking around is there. And they also had told Nicole that Melissa's phone pinged out by this Route 20 bar and grill, which is not far from Bolton Road. It's down, it's coming from Freeport, there's a bar there, and then the road that's on, the next road down is where Bolton Road actually starts at. So they said Melissa's phone pinged at this bar. We searched the bar. Of course, we didn't find anything there. And, from that point on. Okay.
Let me ask you a little bit more about the phone. Do you know what the phone records say? Do you know if there was text? Has the phone been recovered? Let's just get the phone information out of the way right now. What do you know everything about phone information? Very, of course, important here, disappearances in the 21st century.
The phone was actually not even in Melissa's name. It was in her stepdad's name. He had difficulty getting the phone records himself. That they had something. So another thing is that that's really strange is they had something on the phone that, and I'm believing Derek, because Derek was actually kind of a techie, and there was a VPN block on the phone.
Yeah.
So that I think things can't be traced, calls, maybe
right.
Browsing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because it basically, if you know how those work,
I do. In fact, I have one. Yes. So okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that made some of it difficult too. And then I still don't know. I'm sure that the police had to have, or the feds, or anybody in this law enforcement, the Illinois State Attorney General's office, that somebody at this point in time has gotten her phone records. I can't imagine that they haven't. They're not talking about it, but I'm sure They backtracked the GPS data.
Right, we're going to get, we'll get the GPS data. It's going to be very interesting. But the phone itself, is it missing or was it found?
The phone was found.
It was. Where was it found?
It was found in her truck, or in her purse in her truck.
Okay. So her purse was in the truck. Once again, when we say her truck, we mean the truck that she rented.
The rental.
Yep. Yeah, the rental. So the phone was in the truck, her purse was in the truck.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. But the phone information, unfortunately, when it comes to last person she talked to, last person she texted, that's unknown at this point.
It also had been factory reset to erase data. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Okay, so somebody was doing something to that phone.
Yep.
All right.
But we all know that, that they have ways to figure out any of that stuff.
Right.
And they catch people with encrypted phones, and they can figure out what they're doing. So it's...
Right. Yeah. Right. I guess what we're saying is there is a decent possibility that information has been gotten, but we don't know what that information says because it's not been made public.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's totally fine. Now, before we talk about the mother and the 911 calls and all that, finally we're going to get to that, everybody. We just need to set this all up for everybody. We just don't want to be bop around with, I try to keep these things pretty orderly, and as everybody can tell, a lot of things going on in this disappearance, even at the same time. What was Derek's living situation? He was living with his mother, but who else was living there? What do you know about that?
Okay, so the mother had remarried. Derek's father is deceased, and she had remarried, and her husband, Brian Borman, was on hospice in the house. He died just a few weeks, within with maybe a week and a half or something, 8-10 days after this all happened, he actually passed away.
Wow.
And he was in the house. Allegedly, one of Derek's brothers and a brother's wife was in the house. And, like I said, it was reported online in all these pictures that says hostage situation in Shannon.
Right.
And the first few days, everybody was saying it was a hostage situation. And people, we're staking out the Casey's gas station, Melissa's sister and myself, and we're talking to everybody that comes in and out of the gas station, everybody that pulls into the gas station. We're trying to figure out what's going on, if anybody's seen Melissa, if anybody knows anything. And, they're all talking about, wow, the SWAT, basically, the town is so small, essentially SWAT had a huge portion of the town shut down, the school locked down, all that. So it was in a town of 900 people. It was actually a pretty big event.
Right.
And so they were saying that Derek held his mother and at least one of his brothers and the husband on hospice, and one of the brothers' wives allegedly held hostage while the SWAT team showed up, and he didn't surrender right away. It was some negotiating to get him to surrender.
All right. So what we're establishing here is it wasn't only Derek and his mother under this roof. There were at least 2 other people there, living there.
Definitely I think the brother and maybe the brother's wife did not live there. I think they were called there probably by the mother that there's an emergency. Derek's going nuts. Derek did something to Melissa. I can only speculate about that.
Right.
But I think the brother and the wife were called over there to try and calm Derek down. And so there was a lot of strange stuff that happened that morning too.
All right. Well, let's just stick to, I want to because we're looking for corroboration on what we're going to be talking about next. That's all. That's the reason we have to set it up this way. Who was living at the house?
Yeah. I just believe that the mother, Derek, and the stepfather or her husband, whatever you want to call him, that was dying of some sort of health issues.
All right. Just want to make sure we understand that, because you've mentioned other people, and we really need to understand, because what we're going to talk about next, obviously, with Melissa and these 911 calls, very, very important, to establish all of this. All right. Yeah. Let's move on now, being that you've spoken about her many times, this woman who seemingly has run interference for Derek for many years. It's a very common theme. There's all sorts of mothers who have given their bad sons alibis that we've talked about on Unfound, surely. So, all right. Let's first talk about, of course, Derek eventually got taken into custody. Was the mother questioned? Do you know what she said after Derek got taken into custody over this hostage situation? Do we know anything about that?
So, what the only law enforcement at the time that would tell us anything was a lieutenant from the sheriff's department, not in Carroll County where his mother's house is, but in Stevenson County. And he said that it began out that morning, that after the 911 calls were made and all that, that Derek's mother started out cooperating.
Okay.
And she told them stuff, stuff that had happened. And, at first, before at some point in time, she did a 180 and stopped cooperating and lawyered up herself. And,
okay.
And so
after Derek gets taken into custody and she's there, the SWAT team's there, the helicopters are there, all these vehicles are there. She's being questioned about what went on, and once again, you weren't there, but your understanding is that she was cooperative, explaining what went on.
At first, yes.
At first, right.
And to an extent, she said some things that were incriminating. She said at first, I want to make that clear.
Right, at first. And once again, you got this information from the police?
Yes.
Okay,
yep.
Please continue.
And she said that Melissa showed up at about 11:30 at night, which fits for like a 45-minute drive from Monroe, from Nicole's house at about 10:30 or whatever. When Melissa left, that around 11:30, Denise Hammer said that Melissa showed up at her house, right?
Okay.
Of course, in violation of the protection order that the mother bonded him out on.
Yeah.
Which, and Melissa showed up, and then she said she went to bed shortly after, right?
Okay.
And then 3-something, closer to 3:30, 3:45, she was woken by Derek doing something in the basement. And police did not make clear what she said Derek exactly was doing.
Okay.
But they did make clear that she tried to go into the basement and he barred her. And mind you, this is her own house.
Right.
From entering the basement, said, "You can't come down here."
Okay.
No, and blocked her from coming down there. Then obviously that probably didn't fly too well. I don't think that's going to fly well with most parents or homeowners. And she started calling 911, and 3:30, 4 in the morning, 3:45, and she started calling 911, and then and I don't have the exact specific time. Wish I did, but
okay.
She made several calls, and Derek eventually fled her house, and she told the police that he fled her house with either tarps or a Christmas tree bag or both.
Okay.
And her nice folding tables. And that's another thing.
Okay. Did she say what vehicle he was using?
She said, now, she knew about Melissa's vehicle because it was parked outside of her house all of that night, according to the GPS, until she started calling 911. But she claimed Derek got into an old, rusty, gray pickup truck. But now, mind you, the Tundra was like newer. It was only like maybe 2 or 3 years old, the rental vehicle.
Yeah.
And it was two-tone silver and gray. But she told a story that Derek got into another vehicle. She didn't want to say, oh, he's...
Well, we don't know. Let's not try to read her mind. All we're saying is, what did her family, Derek or anybody else, have access to an old gray truck?
Derek did have access to an old gray truck because that is what his friend Jason Rhodes drove, an old gray truck, an old rusty Chevy 1500 pickup truck.
Okay.
Early, I'd say late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay. But this is, let's not try to read anybody's mind. I'm just asking you. So her story was that Derek took off in an old silver/gray truck, not a new silver/gray truck.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's that. Now, mind you, that is what we've heard, but it also does fit because Melissa's sister Mandy has a friend who confronted Denise Hammer in the Shannon Village park, and she recorded half an hour of talking to Denise Hammer. She recorded it on her phone. And Denise Hammer says that in this recording that Melissa's sister's friend has, I believe that they did give copies to law enforcement, and I've heard it. And she mentioned the old gray truck. She's like, no, it wasn't Melissa's Tundra, which was still sitting there because the GPS says it was sitting there. She said, no, it was an old gray pickup truck.
Okay.
And Derek and she complained about it. The only thing she complained about was her nice folding tables that were taken as well.
All right. So this is what she's claiming. Now let's talk about those 911 calls. There are several of them. We don't know the exact number. You have been told about them from the police?
Yes.
All right.
And I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to exactly disclose what I've been told, but I just want to say multiple 911 calls.
Right, okay. But one in particular, allegedly, that got caught on tape. But we know that all 911 calls are recorded, and that's why Benny has expressed some frustration of not being able to get a hold of them. Of course, we're hearing 911 calls all the time, on YouTube, everywhere else, of crimes that have been just committed. But for this disappearance that's several years old now, these ones, seemingly nobody can get them. But we'll just talk about one particular statement that was made allegedly in one of them. But once again, if you're being told this by the police, we can surely talk about it. Did she say something to the effect on a 911 call, Derek, I can't unsee that? Is that true?
Yeah. Yes, that allegedly. I'm going to say that again.
You didn't, of course, you haven't heard it, but that's what you were told.
Yes, a member of law enforcement told not just myself, but also Melissa's sister.
Okay.
That Derek's mother, can be heard saying, Derek, I can't unsee this.
Okay. And we're going to get to what she said later about changing stories and everything. But of course, the 911, some 3:30 in the morning, and we know the police eventually showed up. But the police didn't show up when she made all these calls?
No. As a matter of fact, they didn't show up until, the SWAT team showed up, and I can't put an exact minute on it, but I'm going to say 11:30,
So let's say at least 7.5 hours after the first 911 call was made?
Yeah, I'd say minimum 7.5 hours, 8. Somewhere
right,
in there.
Once again, you're the expert on this disappearance. That's the way the timeline works out to you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Any explanation from police? You have an old woman calling 911 several times and nobody shows up. Any explanation?
No explanation for why it took them, at least 6.5, 7.5 hours to show up. Yep.
Now, obviously, seemingly you have a pretty good relationship with. They're telling you things, even though you aren't even technically, you're not a family member. You're the ex. You have a couple kids with Melissa. You're doing a fantastic job being their father, but you're not part of Melissa's family. And they're telling you things. You've surely asked them about this. Any response to this at all, or do they blow you off? What have they said?
Well, Carroll County, now mind you, there's a ton of different jurisdictions.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there's about 8 different agencies.
Hello?
You got the Illinois State Attorney General's office, plus the feds, and supposedly the Illinois State Police. But you have this crime entered so many different jurisdictions. Melissa's from Wisconsin. This crime began technically in Wisconsin, because it began, you want to think about it, it began, with the gun incident a month and a half earlier, then the high-speed chase, and then, Melissa's a Wisconsin resident. Then the mother's house is in Shannon, Illinois. But the vehicle's abandoned in Stevenson County. Also, and we can get into this later on the GPS data, her vehicle was driven to another county that night, too.
Right.
They're involved. Then they have another county that's involved just because that's the nearest major crimes unit in the area. That Carroll County doesn't have one, and I don't know. I'm sure Stevenson County should, but there's another county that's Joe Davies County had some detectives involved in this too. And
all right, being that most of the listeners are not from Illinois or Wisconsin, certainly have listeners in both, but of course there's 48 other states in the rest of the world. But what county, what jurisdiction would be responsible for calls to 911 from Derek's mother's house?
From the mother's house is in Carroll County, and it was the Carroll County's Sheriff's Department has the 911 call center.
Mm-hmm.
So
so once again, if you've spoken to Carroll County, have they ever given any explanation about why they didn't show up when an older woman, seemingly in distress multiple times, calls 911 and they didn't show up?
Nope. No explanation. That
I lost Benny.
Yep.
Benny, I lost you there for a second. Please state whatever they didn't show up at all.
Like I said, they showed up many hours later.
Many hours. Once again, no explanation why they didn't show up within like 20 minutes.
No explanation. Nope.
Do you think it's because, I'm going to ask you bluntly, do you think it's because it was the Derek Hammer house, or the Hammers had a reputation, and something that I really, really don't necessarily want to get too deep into, but because of things that have been said about, like you said early on, Derek getting charged with things and then seemingly not getting the maximum sentence, maybe things along those lines?
Yep, absolutely. The family is one of the oldest, wealthiest families in the area. Denise Hammer herself is the village clerk for Shannon, and she is on the village board. As the clerk, she pays the Shannon police their paychecks. She is connected to all kinds of people. We have pictures of her with senators. We have, and that are close friends that she campaigned for. We have pictures of her. Here's another one. We have a picture of her at a party with the Shannon Village Fire Chief. But another thing that the Shannon Village Fire Chief does is he's also the county's emergency management coordinator. So when they have a tornado, or they have this or that, or they have a missing person, like Melissa's case, he's the guy that was the head of all their searches, of law enforcement searches. It is this guy, and I have pictures of her with him, which I think is a conflict of interest.
Okay, all right. So now that we have all that established, she makes these calls. In one of them, you've been told that she says, it's recorded, Derek, I can't see that. So seemingly she's on the phone, she's talking to her son Derek, and she's saying, I can't unsee that.
Yes,
all right.
That is what a lieutenant with Stevenson County told Melissa's sister and myself.
Okay.
Derek, I can't unsee this.
All right, so she's making these calls. She's worried about something, can't unsee something. Derek's obviously there. Something's going on. We know that Melissa, we're going to get to the GPS. We know the truck that she rented is there. And later, though, when we get to the grand jury or whatever we want to call it, does Derek's mother's story change?
Yes.
Please tell the listeners. I know you've mentioned a couple times. I know you want to talk about it. This is the opportunity to do so.
Yep. Well, so we had a family meeting, which was like, it was at the Greene County Sheriff's Department. And so Melissa's parents, and that includes her stepdad, her real dad, her mother, her sister, a family friend or two, myself, John, Delena's dad, and his wife. So there was 15 of us there.
Wow.
And the lieutenant from Stevenson County, of course, he's the one that comes, but, it's Carroll County investigating this stuff, but who shows up but the Stevenson County, lieutenant, because Carroll County is really just, snub their noses at us and not been interactive with the family. And when they have been interactive with the family, they have failed to address a lot of things. They failed to speak to witnesses. They failed to, they failed to show up for 7.5 hours after all these 911 calls. It's just, the place has a history of, I'd say less than terrible policing. It's even worse than that.
But what happened is, so you're all families together, the police are there, and I'm asking you about how her story changed. Once again, your perception that her story changed. Please.
The lieutenant from Stevenson County told Melissa's family and myself that Denise Hammer showed up at the grand jury and lied her ass off, and so did Jason Neesman, who is Derek's friend, who helped Derek abandon Melissa's vehicle that morning. And he said that, Denise Hammer had gone to a grand jury and completely changed her story and lied her ass off. And Derek's friend did as well,
So do we know, once again, I realize grand jury testimony is private and everything, but do you have an inkling of what that means that she changed her story? For example, I'll just ask you directly. She makes these 911 calls. What does she say about those 911 calls later?
I don't know what she tried to attribute those to, and the lieutenant didn't go into detail about what she was lying about, but I believe from what was said that she even tried to back out of the day that she saw, the night that where she told them the next morning Melissa was there when she went to sleep and this and that. Right. I think she even tried to back off of that and say maybe Melissa wasn't there that night, and that she had, she'd been mistaken about the date or something like that. That's the assumption I have. I don't want to say that was set in stone as far as...
Yeah, because you weren't there, but all we know is she's calling 911 multiple times, and then all of a sudden later, I don't know if it might be weeks later or something, months later, I don't know.
This is probably a year into it, maybe a year plus.
All right, so a year later, she's saying, that's not what happened. It was a different night. That was totally blown out of proportion, etc.
Yeah.
Even though she knows that eventually a SWAT team did show up at her house.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when he said that she lied her ass off, it's you have the right to plead the fifth. Everybody has that. We have the right not to say it. Mm-hmm. You do not have the right to perjure yourself or to provide false information. As a matter of fact, I believe it can go beyond.
Yeah, you can never lie. Right.
Yep.
I don't know. The thing is, all I know about law is from Law and Order. But when it comes to grand jury testimony, I don't think the fifth, maybe depends on the state or whatever else, but I don't think you can use the Fifth Amendment for grand jury testimony. I don't think so. But in any case, you can't ever lie, and the police's belief is that she lied.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, and did Derek? I don't know. So, what ended up happening with Derek regarding him being taken into custody and all of that? What did end up happening?
Took a year and a half, 2 years probably to come to a resolution. So amazingly, he actually got bonded out again. Now, Melissa was a missing person already. Pretty much everybody, including like even the media, knew he was involved. And although Carroll County would never come out and just say like, okay, he's our suspect or this or that, but it was already circulating that he was. And of course, his mother bonded him out again at this point, and that was like some months after Melissa was missing already. And that actually really, people panicked. Melissa's whole family. I'm like, my children are witnesses against him in the gun incident. Is he going to come and try and kill my children, or am I going to be taking the kids to school in the morning, or taking the trash out? He's going to shoot us in our back. Shoot me in my back.
Yeah, we don't need the explicit of it. We just get the idea. He's out. He's dangerous.
He's dangerous. Well, it didn't. Thank God, it did not last long. It was less than a week, and he went over to his direct next door neighbor's house, knocked on the door, and said, blah blah blah. Now the neighbor had been pressuring at the village board meetings, where the mother is, a village board member and the village clerk, and had been pressuring about Melissa's case. The neighbor had, and saying, we want the truth, we want justice for this girl. You shouldn't be sitting here on this board.
Right.
She disappeared from your house.
Right.
And so Derek went over to this neighbor's house, knocked on the door, and threatened to kill the neighbor. He said, "Don't you know I'm Derek Hammer? I will kill you." That's what he said to him.
All right.
So you didn't need to tell him you're Derek Hammer. He's your next door neighbor. He knows exactly who you are. So he was picked back up. At this point in time, he wasn't given another bond. Thank God. And then it took some time to play out through court for the assault and the gun charges, the high-speed chase, the child endangerment, the drugs. And he was facing 180 years just in Wisconsin alone on that, without even anything to do with Melissa's disappearance. And he went in front of a judge in a different county, because they said there's too much publicity. They moved to a different county in front of a Judge Ashley Morse in Janesville, Wisconsin, at the Rock County Circuit Court. And Judge Ashley Morse is just disturbing, because she pandered to Derek in court and was like, "Oh, he's never had a chance for drug treatment. Get his life right. He was facing 180 years. She gave him 5.
5 years. 5 years.
5 years for hitting Melissa with the kitchen utensil, for pointing a shotgun at her as a felon in possession of a firearm, mind you. And he didn't get federal charges for that, which is bizarre, because so many people get caught with guns as felons and get an automatic federal charge.
Okay.
And then he didn't get charged with that, even though his DNA was on the guns. And then child endangerment, high-speed chase, where he was put people's lives at risk, the stolen truck that he took back to Melissa's house, the drugs, all of that stuff. And then they know he's a suspect, and even though they can't say that in court, it's like Melissa's missing.
Yeah, she's missing. Yeah.
Witness against you in multiple cases in 2 different states, and because she also was a witness at his weed house charges too, which still were going through the court at that time, because Melissa when she wasn't coming home, she was spending the night at his weed house. And so she's a witness against him in charges in Illinois. She's a witness against him in charge, and not a witness against, because like I said, she wasn't exactly the most cooperating witness.
Yeah.
But technically, a witness. And even in cases if a person has their sister call and say, "Hey, tell your brother not to testify against me," they get witness tampering.
Yeah. But all right, so I think we get the point, Benny. He got off lightly from this one particular judge.
Yeah, 5 years.
Is he in jail right now as we do this interview?
Yes, he is.
And how long is he going to be in jail?
He's in prison in Wisconsin. He actually only had about a year and a half left because he had some time served from time he sat in jail waiting for court, and then which is maybe like a year and a half or 2 years. He was given 5 years. Wisconsin is like 85% of your time. You can't get early release without 85% of your time. Although the judge did make him eligible for earned release programs like boot camp or drug treatment, which he could have gotten out right away if he'd have completed those. But like last year, he was in Racine prison, and he decided it would be a good idea to hit his cellmate with a lock in a sock.
Wow.
And so, which they gave him intent to cause great bodily harm, assault with intent to cause great bodily harm, and they gave him, he just got sentenced to 4 more years for that.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely, because he was close to getting out. And now I think he can't get any good time. You can't, it's basically, I think he's about 5 years right now with the last bit of his 5-year sentence and the new 4 years for assaulting his cellmate.
All right, so if Wisconsin can keep their spine, he's going to be in jail until 2031?
I think that's probably close. I don't have an exact date.
All right, that's fine. All right, so he's in jail. Let's, so we've gone through that. Let's go through some more things. So then, of course, we have the story. Mother said he took off. I mean, she might deny it later, but we're going to go by what she initially said. We've talked about the GPS on the truck. Was the rental company helpful in being able to track this truck wherever it went?
Yeah, I don't know exactly that it was the rental company, but the feds, the FBI, whatever, was able to backtrack the GPS data.
All right.
And so the truck sat outside of Melissa's house, or not Melissa's house, Denise Hammer's house, most of the night until the time that basically coincides with the mother calling 911. I don't know if he left after the first call, the second call, third call, or whatever, but she called 911, and he left in a panic with, as she had said, tarps or Christmas tree bag and her nice folding tables, which is all she really seemed to care about.
Right.
But he left, and he drove to a piece of property that was allegedly owned by his uncle Joe Hammer Jr., and that property is in the next county over, which is a completely different county than the other 2 counties. The one where her truck was found, and the county the mother's house is in. So drove to Ogle County and to this property, and there is a airplane hangar. It's actually a airport. It's listed with the FAA as an airport because it's just a grass runway on a farm with a crop duster. And Derek drove behind. He pulled in there. They got this, on GPS. All right,
so we have to. So GPS shows that he, eventually when this was all figured out, where he went after he left his mother's house, even though of course she's changing her story and whatever else. The GPS doesn't lie. So GPS, trace it to this. We can't call it a landing strip with a hanger on it, like you said, for a crop duster or something. But that's what led them there. But there's actually video.
Yes.
All right. So we have to set this up. So there's like a video camera on the property. Did they get a warrant to get possession of it? How long did that take to get this?
I'm going to say this. I don't have an exact date, but I do know that the uncle, who they had said was so cooperative at first, he owns a lot of different properties, farms, cornfields, grain fields, stuff like that, and a couple businesses. They were saying the uncle was so cooperative, but when they asked the uncle about cameras out at that property, he said no, there were none. At some point in time, they figured out that there actually was cameras actually right on the shed that the plane is kept in, and there's some cameras, watching, protecting the plane probably. And so they went, and at that point in time, like, some of these digital video recorders that cameras systems are on like a loop, right? It's like a 30-day, 90-day. Well, I think it was like a 30-day loop, which means that it records for 30 days, and then it basically like rewrites from the beginning over and does another 30 days on top of, So by the time they got out there, thanks to the uncles lying and saying that there was no camera system, by the time that they got there, allegedly, by the time that they got out there, it had rewritten over itself. But and so people know this, is the government has ways to pull that up, programs that actually can pull up the data that has been, the video footage, data, whatever you want to call it, that has been rewritten over. They can pull that right back up, and they did in this case. And,
all right, so I guess what we're saying is the uncle was cooperative, maybe a little too cooperative for his family, I guess, being that maybe he changed his mind later. That we're lucky that this video even existed at all.
Well, he supposedly wasn't the one that it finally admitted there was cameras. It was the guy that owned the plane in the shed, who was a whole other person.
All right, well, good for that guy, good for that pilot. All right. So they go out there, and even so, we're lucky that this family member, if they suspected something, didn't just take the hard drive and everything else and chuck it in the water somewhere.
Absolutely.
So what does the video, when they finally did the video, what does it show?
Okay. This is the tricky part. Now, when they pull this stuff back up, they say it's out of chronological order. It's not in chronological order anymore when they use that program and pull it. What? They said they did see Derek pull in there. And the GPS also confirms all this stuff, says the vehicle was there like less than 5 minutes. Right? That Melissa's truck drove in. He drives behind the shed the plane is kept in, and a couple big tanks, and I don't know if they're tanks just for fuel or for the chemicals that they spray with the crop duster. But he drove behind the shed, was there for a couple minutes, and then they seen him drive out and fishtail through the ditch at a high rate of speed, kicking up gravel. And so,
is this the rental truck?
In the rental truck, yes.
All right.
The vehicle. Yep. So, and and like I said, this is a different county over. It's even a different town. It's Forreston, Illinois, in Ogle County. And so, this is where I don't like the.
Okay, let me just jump in here. So he goes fishtailing out of here, and that's the last that is seen on the video.
That's the last that allegedly. See, but the thing is that they say that this video, they don't know, and they're saying this, and they told us this. They don't know if Derek came back himself.
Okay.
Now, I got to tell you this too: is that the theory.
Well, and again, we're not going to do it. I don't want to get into theories. I just want to say, regarding the video, is anything else seen on the video that can be connected possibly to Melissa's disappearance?
No, but during 2 different searches, cadaver dogs hit right next to the shed where Derek drove behind, right where he drove behind.
Right.
On 2 different searches, many months apart. The first one was just law enforcement. The second one, law enforcement invited Melissa's family and our search team, and we went out there, and it was the same cadaver dogs that the law enforcement had on their first search, and we were standing right there when the dog hit by the shed, and they said, this is the same spot the dog hit last time, which was months prior, right? So the belief is that when Derek pulled in there, his mother...
unfortunately, we can't get into beliefs. We can't do theories. I'm just going to ask you this. You've not seen the video, though, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I'm just going to ask you this. Derek goes on there. He goes behind the shed. Does it seem like he stops for a minute or two?
Yep.
He wasn't like just taking a joyride through the airstrip. He actually went and stopped for a couple minutes, then left.
Yep.
He
went behind the shed, the plane is kept in, and then a couple minutes later he came back out.
Okay. But we can't see what goes on behind the shed, right?
I don't believe so. That part I'm not 100% certain.
Okay.
But I do know that they said that they identified him. Whether or not he was in the truck or out of the truck, I don't know. Right. But they can see his bald head, and see him either driving Melissa's truck, or they actually seen him. He got out of the truck and they've seen him on video. They know that he's there with Melissa's truck.
All right. Very good. Now, we have to remember the truck was eventually ditched. How far is it from where that landing strip is to where the truck was eventually found?
So I said 12 or 15 miles from Shannon. Add another 3 or 4 miles, because that airplane hangar that's in a different county. Shannon's right on 2 different county lines, 3 really, and that's just 4 miles outside of Shannon. But it's in a whole different county,
Right.
It's kind of like the convergence of 3 different county lines within about a 5-mile area,
Right.
So
the
truck from the hangar, supposedly, allegedly, I'm going to say, goes back to Derek's mother's house, right?
Okay.
Is there for a few minutes, and then is driven straight to his friend Jason Neesman's house.
Okay.
And then it's there, I would say, less than even 5 minutes. It's 2 minutes at Neesman's house. And then from Neesman's house, it goes to Bolton Road, where it was abandoned.
Eventually abandoned. Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess what we're also saying is that GPS truck, according to the GPS, and it's so great that, this has been a regular car. Of course, rental companies put GPS on cars, and, in case they didn't get stolen, they can track them down if people don't return them. Fortunately, we got that in this case. I don't know what would be, it still would maybe be a lot of information, but without this GPS, certainly this is be a big missing piece. But I guess what we're saying is the GPS never shows the truck going back to the airstrip again.
Nope.
Okay.
No. Back to the mother's house.
Yeah.
Back to the mother's house for a few minutes. And then, which I believe Derek went back and tried to smooth things over, like his mom.
Well, once again, we don't want to start. Yeah. We don't want to start theorizing about. We weren't there. They weren't talking. We don't know. Yeah. We don't. Let's let the listeners make up their minds for themselves. All we're just trying to stick to are the facts. GPS says this. GPS says that. 911 calls, pings, where trucks are found. That's what we do here. Okay, so eventually the truck is found out there. And then, of course, not long after that, we have this hostage situation, correct?
Yep.
All right. And then Derek gets taken into custody. All right. What this is, so in the timeline, as best as you can tell, regarding how long was it between the truck getting dumped where it was found and the SWAT team showing up at Derek's mother's? Do we have a time frame on that?
Probably at least still a good 5-6 hours at that point.
Okay.
6.5, 5 hours.
Okay. I'll ask you this once again. We'll just do a little theorizing here, permitted. Is there enough time within all of that somebody could have gone back out? Somebody else, maybe Jason or somebody else, could have gone back out to that landing strip on his own during this time?
Yeah, I think at that point the door is pretty wide open for a lot of different possibilities. Right? That's the way I see it too. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So, then we know once again this hostage situation, Melissa is missing. But we have his mother's statement, which I think we're going to choose to believe the first time around, not which, whatever she said later. He's leaving, taking a box, taking a tarp. Everybody, you don't have to be a disappearance expert to read between the lines on it, so I'm just going to leave it there. But was the house searched? It sounds like the airport was searched. Maybe we want to come back to that in a bit. But what about the house? We have this hostage situation. Did they go in there? Did they go into the basement? Yeah. Did they find anything that maybe any signs of violence?
So listen to this. This is like one of the most interesting things. I told you we were in Shannon relatively soon, like that evening.
Yeah.
Because everything from the SWAT team on Facebook to Danny's call that he did something to Melissa not showing up at work. So me and Melissa's sister were just basically we were in Shannon for probably 3 or 4 days after that, just not even I wasn't even going home to my kids. I really just went to my kids. And so we drove by Denise Hammer's house frequently, trying to figure out what's going on. They did not search the house for 3 days until a judge signed off on a warrant, which I find highly suspicious. And so there was, but I can say this, they had a sheriff's deputy and different ones switched off for that entire 3 days, parked outside and just sitting there.
Okay.
And and it took 3 days for them to get a warrant from a judge, which, I mean, I've heard of judges on call waking up in the middle of the night and faxing in a warrant to raid dope houses, so it's like,
I have too.
I just find that 3 days, you could have done it the next day, you could have done it, when you came into work that morning, 3 days.
Well, you've had a lot of, you've had a lot of communication with the police over these years. Has one of them ever given you an explanation? Have they ever expressed some frustration with that? Anything?
No. I mean,
okay.
No, they haven't really. I mean, we've been frustrated by it. I say,
yeah, but I'm just wondering, police. Any of them express some sort of frustration themselves? We thought that we would have been, with a hostage situation, we thought we'd be able to go right in there. Probable cause. You don't need a warrant if there's probable cause, and that's not what happened.
Exactly. Yep. And it isn't. 3 days to get the warrant to search the house. So, and in 3 days' time, I feel like you can clean up a lot, especially if you have a head start.
You absolutely could, but once they did get in there, was anything noteworthy found? To your once again, to your knowledge, of course, the police don't have to say anything, but to your knowledge,
little bits and pieces. But law enforcement said it looked like a crime scene, and they said that they also brought Cadaver Dog into the basement where Derek was, and Cadaver Dog allegedly alerted down there too. And so,
okay.
I mean,
all right. So they did search it, but nothing. Of course, Melissa's still missing. Derek's in jail, but not seemingly for anything related to Melissa going missing. Certainly, maybe against prior crimes against Melissa and everything, but nothing regarding the disappearance. So if they did find anything, it wasn't overtly substantial.
No.
I mean, not enough to bring charges against them.
No.
Okay.
I can say this is that I feel like the only people really pushing at that point in time for any of this law enforcement activity was the state of Wisconsin. Yeah. The detectives who had interrogated Melissa, the one whose business card was found in Melissa's vehicle.
Yeah, right.
I feel like they were pushing Illinois to do something, but Derek was arrested, and I've been arrested myself before. When you get arrested, they do these booking photos, right? And they take pictures of you from all three angles, right? Left, right, center.
Certainly, if you've been arrested, Benny, you would know more about that than I would. So, yes, you're the expert on that. So, yes, please explain.
And I've never seen any different. And I've
Okay.
talked to people across the country, and they've never seen any different, left, right, center. So they released these pictures of Derek in his booking photo, right? You should look at these if you get a chance. They're
Okay.
pretty interesting.
All right.
So they only released the center and the right. But in the center picture, you can clearly see huge gashes on the left side of his face, huge one. Nail marks. I'm going to say it looks like Melissa clawed him right in his face. I believe that 100%. And another thing, in the same photo, right, he has a towel or a white bandage on his neck, on his shoulder, where his shoulder sticks out from his orange denim jumpsuit. He had a white towel or a big white bandage on his, it's up in the air what it is, on his neck, covering up what we believe is more defensive wounds that Melissa left on him. And we've been told different stories about that too, and by the law enforcement there, and not, I don't believe honest ones.
Okay.
And just a lot of anomalies.
All right, so we got these booking photos that maybe trying to put the best spin on things.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So we got the house, we got the airport, we got the truck, we got all these things, we got all these other characters, cast of characters, and Jason Niesman and Rhodes and everyone else. What has Derek had to say about all this?
He's been questioned by all kinds of people, including feds and Joe Davies detectives and Carroll County detectives, and he is saying, he's claiming Melissa ran off because she had criminal charges, right? And she ran off with a Mexican drug dealing truck driver. That's the one I think that he said the most. And then his mother is like, "Oh, Melissa ran off because she's got criminal charges." Remember, she's a first offender who got her criminal charges, her first criminal charges in her whole life as a victim to begin with. So it's, and Melissa would never just up and leave the kids. It's not, it's not her character or nature.
Does Derek even, obviously by this point, Derek knows what the GPS has. He knows that he's driving that truck around, that it has GPS on it and everything. He doesn't even acknowledge that she was at the house that night. How far, is he denying that she ever was at the house that night? How far is he taking this?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew. I just know that he's tried to say everything. Melissa ran off because she's got criminal charges. Melissa ran off with a Mexican drug dealing truck driver. Melissa, it's just not a accurate narrative.
Right. The GPS says otherwise. And maybe I'll ask you this: being that he surely knows that this video showed him driving Melissa's rental truck, has he ever even acknowledged that? Or does he say, "Oh, that's not me, that's somebody else, oh, that's not the truck"? Anything.
I'm not really sure, actually. I don't know.
Okay. All right.
I wish I had the investigation files.
I know, I got you, but I have to ask. I don't know everything that is in your head. I'm making sure we get everything out in this interview that's factual. Yeah. And once again, we just have to stay away from things when we try to get inside people's heads, and when we take what I would call the theorizing a little too far, because I don't like to spoon feed the audience. What have all these other people said? Of course, you've thrown out a lot of other names: Jay Road, Jason Niesman, on and on and on. What have they said about all this?
So Jason Niesman said, and this is initially, and I also believe at the grand jury, he said that Derek showed up at his house walking. The GPS data says that's a lie. Right? He said Derek showed up at his house walking. He gave him a ride back to Shannon, which is, like I said, like, now he lives kind of over there. He lives in the country on Babs Grove Road, which is like Pearl City. And he lives over there fairly close to where, like maybe 2 miles from where the vehicle was abandoned at, right? And he said Derek showed up walking, and then he was acting crazy, and he gave him a ride back to Shannon. But he was acting crazy, so he kicked him out of the car in the Shannon Village Baptist Church parking lot, right?
Okay.
But the thing is you just drove this man 12 miles back to Shannon, and why didn't you drive him the other 3 or 4 blocks? Because Shannon's tiny, it's 900 people, only like 6 blocks across the whole town. Why didn't you drive him the other 3 blocks to the mother's house?
Right.
And my thing is, he did not want to be seen dropping Derek off by camera or by a neighbor, you know.
Okay.
And it's just a load of crap. You gave him a ride all the way back to Shannon, but the last 3 blocks you decided to let him out early. And that just doesn't, you know.
What has Jason Niesman done with his life since this all happened? Has he had all the police problems that Derek has, or what?
You know, I think he's, I know he's, you know, on the meth and other drugs, because people just told me. But he has maintained, like, he's one of those probably functioning addicts where he's maintained a job. You know, he lived in Illinois all of these years. His whole life, his whole family lives around there. So after Melissa disappeared, he hid out at a lady's house right over by that Route 20 Bar and Grill, by the way. And there's some other suspicious stuff. I know you don't want to get into...
We're sticking to the disappearance today.
Yeah. So he hid out at a lady's house for a couple weeks, and then he skipped off, quit his job, and left Illinois altogether, all within a month of Melissa's disappearance, you know, and moved out in the middle of the night. You know, we were driving by and watching his house, you know, and in the middle of the night, it wasn't even during the day. He didn't move all this stuff out during the day and leave and go to Florida. It was like, literally, he just disappeared, and he was in Florida.
All right. So this is what the cast of characters has done since then. Are any of them in jail like Derek is?
No. No.
Do you know if police pick a jurisdiction? We've talked about so many different ones. I know the listeners are going to have a hard time keeping it all straight, being that most of them are not from the area. Some of them surely are, but most of them are not. Do you know if Jay or Jason or any of these guys have ever been offered a deal to roll over on Derek for the disappearance of Melissa?
I don't. No. The son's mother and the landlord went with me and tried to talk to the original detective on Melissa's case, and that is the Carroll County detective, David Mercado. And this is like a year into Melissa's disappearance, and they wanted to, you know, offer this information that they have or whatever. And the detective said, we have all the witnesses we need, and I'm not talking to anybody else. He said he wanted to talk to me, but he didn't want to talk to these ladies that came with me. And which I feel like is, you know, I think you talk to everybody, and you know, all witnesses are good witnesses until determined otherwise, right? You know, I think I've heard that's like the detective's motto, you know, and that until you've reviewed whatever information a witness wants to give you, you can't say, you know, that they're irrelevant until you've actually at least heard them out, right? At the very least.
Right.
You know. So, yeah. No, I don't know that they've offered them any deals. Just for 1 second to go back to that.
Go ahead.
I do not believe that they don't know who came back, because they know that Melissa's body was stashed there.
Well, we don't know that. We don't know that. So, but we can't say if we don't know that. That's a suspicion.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is the video, the camera, we know this camera. We have Derek going through the property, but what about other people going through the property? right?
say,
We don't have anything. We don't have anything on that.
Chronological order, right? And they say I don't remember if it was gigabytes or trilobytes, but like so much data to go through. They said they were watching the video every chance they got. They're watching the video. They're waiting to see who came back, whether or not it's Derek or Neesman or Jay Rhodes or Stephen Dapkus or maybe Mitch Hammer, Derek's cousin, because that property used to be theirs. You know, the Uncle Joe's, it used to be theirs. You know, and technically it's not even Joe Haley's property legally. But, you know, I don't buy that they don't know who came back. And I don't believe it was Derek. They came back to that hangout.
Okay.
And
let's move on to this. How have your, of course, it's been a few years now. You know, this happened in October of 2021, so it's like 4.5 years ago. How have your kids been holding up the last 4.5 years, Benny?
They are doing amazing in school despite all of this. They struggle with anxiety and depression. They get PTSD. I mean, you know, they saw a lot of stuff in Melissa's house when Derek was there that they should have never, ever had to be subjected to. You know, I was honest, fairly close in the beginning of this about what my opinions were about what happened. And that is like a conversation that you do not want to have with children, because there's no nice way to tell children that you think that their mother was murdered.
Yeah.
You know, and at the same time, I didn't think it would be fair to like lead my kids on and have them thinking, oh, mom's coming back next week, or she's coming back next year, or she's coming back in 6 months, and she's, you know, one day she's just going to show up, you know? Yeah. And I didn't think that was fair at all. And that's why I chose to be like, you know, honest with them about it. But it was the most difficult conversation I've ever had to have in my entire life. And, you know, it's sad. They have breakdowns, you know, just out of the blue. They'll just start crying about their mother. And it's just, you know, it's unfair that they haven't gotten closure. It's unfair to Melissa. Melissa deserves the respect and dignity that anybody else deserves. A funeral, you know, I mean, not to be discarded somewhere in God knows what sort of way, you know, and you know, it's really, really unfair. And we feel stuck, all of us, sometimes maybe even myself, more than the kids, because I want closure for my children so bad that it drives me nuts, you know, obsessing about this and thinking about it, and just like, and it's just difficult because I feel like we're just stuck. And you know, it's like, it's hard. How do you move on to the next chapter in the book of life, you know, when you know, this chapter isn't finished? It's like, it's, you know, it's very difficult. And I have actually made some pretty good friends of other families of victims. And some of them have gone even a lot longer than this. And I just don't know how they do it, because, you know, it just feels like life has just literally been on hold or stuck, or just, you know, like, you know, the kids are getting bigger, they're aging, but it's like, to some extent, like, certain progress has not happened. You know, it's, I don't know, you know,
the world keeps spinning. You know, it's kind of stopped for you, as I stated right when we first started this conversation. I think everybody can surely tell that you, despite all the problems that you had with Melissa and everything, you still deeply, deeply, deeply care about her. And here you are still caring about her, and the world keeps spinning. People moving on with their lives has to be tough.
It is, it is. It's hard to, every time I think of Melissa, it's hard to have a good thought about Melissa without thinking about, the end, thinking about the current, state of things, like thinking about like what's happened to her. It's like, it's hard to have, I was married to somebody else before, I actually had a really close marriage relationship with that person. And, when I think of her, I think of like good things. When I think of Melissa, when I think of the good things, or I think of her smiling, or I think of like any good thing that I can think of, then it's always in the back of my head that like the worst case scenario has happened, and there's no resolution. There's no closure. And I just, I really empathize with anybody that's ever lost a loved one as a missing person or as a homicide victim, because they a lot of times don't have closure too. And it's tough. It's tough. I don't know. It's
what kind of relationship do you continue to have? You've talked about Melissa's mother, for example. What kind of relationship do you continue to have with her family?
I wish it was better, but I just wish it was better. I don't want to talk about that too much.
All right. Fine. That's totally fine. How about your family? Obviously, they're watching you go through all of this. How supportive have they been?
Oh, they are supportive, and I can't say that they aren't. But they also like worry about like the effect of this, on my mental health and watching my children, because I do obsess about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no closure, and they worry about how the kids see me, I'm on Facebook talking to people about Melissa's case, or I'm talking to podcasters, I'm doing this, I'm calling and arguing with officials, or calling and talking to people in political positions, trying to get them to put pressure on Melissa's case. And I understand, like, I sometimes feel like my family just move on, you gotta let it go. You gotta, but how do you? It's like, how do you let it go? When you don't have closure, it's difficult. It's like a very fine line of,
right,
of letting things go and pushing for justice, pushing for accountability, pushing for answers, and then the flip side of that is like, people not understanding why, I keep pushing because I can't imagine like going through this for another 4 years. I mean, I can't imagine my kids going through this without getting some answers, without having a funeral and getting a chance to say goodbye to their mother, without Derek being held accountable and the people that I believe helped him also being accountable. Because the one thing that I don't want is just, because like, I know you said beliefs or whatever, but there's more people involved in this, and those people,
I think that's reasonable. Sure.
Those people have never, whether or not they're just perjuring themselves, whether or not they helped him, whether or not they disposed of Melissa's body, those people haven't even been addressed, let alone being held accountable. Yeah. And even like the grand jury testimonies and stuff like that, like, that they went in there and didn't tell the truth. But I thought the whole point of a grand jury is, like you said, like, you can't plead the fifth in a grand jury. And they're supposed to use a grand jury to force these people to tell the truth. Right. That was what I thought was the whole point of having a grand jury to begin with.
All right.
And I just feel like they had those cards You know, they know that Neesman wasn't telling the truth when he said Derek showed up walking. They have the GPS data that says that is not true. You know, they know that he helped abandon Melissa's vehicle. You know, that he didn't just give Derek a ride to Shannon. That is not even in the timeline. That it's walking that 2 miles and this and that. You know, but they know from the GPS Melissa's vehicle was there for a couple minutes. Yeah. You know, so he's not telling the truth, and the mother was allowed to just change the story. And like I said, you can say nothing, right? And like maybe, and I think you're probably right about a grand jury. There's only, you know, that maybe that the Fifth Amendment is thrown out the window in a grand jury. That might not even apply. You know, there's certain laws that people think their Fifth Amendment always applies.
Yeah, it's not. Grand jury is not a criminal trial. There's a lot more leniency on, you know, a lot more things that can be presented and everything. It's really just a test. It's like a test run, you know. That's all it is.
But you hear about people that a grand jury is essentially like what I always thought about a grand jury is that they're going to go in there and you know, if you tell a lie, they're going to say this evidence shows that you are not being upfront and forward truthful, and since you're lying, we're going to charge you with perjury, or we're going to charge you as an accomplice, or as an accessory, or as, you know. And I thought that really that's my opinion about a grand jury, because I have heard about grand juries being used in that sort of way. Grand jury testimony being forced or compelled by, here's the deal. We know that you're lying. You're sitting there lying on that stand. You want to continue that, we're going to charge you. You know? And that's always been my opinion of, because I am familiar with how a grand jury works. Like you said, I didn't know that you specifically couldn't.
I don't. No, I'm not. It's not. We're not going to start doing it. It's not illegal. You know, it's not a law professor podcast. But yes, I guess what we're saying here is you had expectations of how things were going to go, given what you know, and they haven't gone that way.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Benny, do you have a Facebook page, website, anything like that? Is there anything set up for Melissa's disappearance? If so, why don't you tell the listeners about it now? Whether you have TikTok, Instagram, whatever you got, tell the listeners about it right now.
Well, you know, there was one that I was a member of. I never actually ran a Facebook group for Melissa.
Oh, okay.
I do share stuff about Melissa. I have missing people of Carroll County, Stevenson County, and I think it's in Northern Illinois. I got to look at it because it's been a while since I do actually share stuff on there, and it's a lot of other missing people and stuff. Mm-hmm. But the one I think somebody else did, and there's Bring Melissa Trumpy Home. Let me look on Facebook here. There's Bring Melissa Trumpy Home. That is one that was run by a guy that actually helped do some of the searches for Melissa. And then the biggest one was the Melissa Trumpy timeline. It's like Melissa Trumpy timeline facts, something. What I do a lot of is there's all these different like local like town Facebook pages for villages and towns. And in that whole area, I've joined these all over northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and so I'll use those to share Melissa's like digital flyers on. The one that I would have given you, they actually quit running, unfortunately. Melissa Trumpy missing from Wisconsin is one. This is one. Melissa Trumpy / missing from Wisconsin.
Okay.
And there's still 4,000 members on here, But at the same time, nobody's posted anything since March.
Oh my.
There. And then
Yeah, people got to keep these things active.
Oh, I know. It's hard to do that, but
it is.
There are some other things that we do too. Every year for the past 3 years, the village of Shannon has what they call the homecoming festival and parade, and that is also coincides with, I think, is it Labor Day is the end of the summer, right? Is it Labor Day is the end of summer, right? I always mix up.
Labor Day is the end of summer. Yes.
So it's Labor Day weekend, and then we go and we march. We have these big banners with Melissa and the kids on it, and signs, justice for Melissa Trumpy, and we get a big bullhorn and call out the way we think that Melissa's case has been handled, and we actually get a lot of support at that. And then Melissa Trumpy / missing from Wisconsin is one. I wish that it was updated, but it's not. There is a lot. There is a lot of stuff. If people Google Melissa Trumpy's name,
yeah, there's quite a bit. You're right. I agree.
Go to YouTube even, and there is a ton of stuff on there. And unfortunately, not a lot of that stuff is current and updated, but there is, there's a lot of material on there.
Benny, any final words before we complete this interview?
I just am praying that this is over soon and that it is addressed, and that there is accountability for all this. I hope that Melissa's body is recovered, and which also leads me to where I said earlier, I believe there's other people involved in this.
Yeah.
I believe one thing, Derek got picked up by that SWAT team. I don't know that Derek had time to get rid of Melissa's body during that time. And I think it's possible someone else did. I think it's more than possible. As a matter of fact, I personally, that's my personal opinion. Okay. But I don't think that they will find Melissa's body until they address these accomplices. I think you have to address the accomplices to get to the bottom of it. And the bottom of it really truly is where's Melissa's body, Yeah. And I think that they have to address every single person involved to do that. I don't think it's just, and the thing is, Derek himself, he's never going to cooperate and tell the truth. And his history shows that. He's not. I mean, he will take it to his grave, and I think that he gets. I hate to say it like this, but it's like the last thing he has left to hold on to.
Sure. Very common.
It's like,
yes.
And that's one thing too that I actually have spoken to a lot of political people in northern Illinois, and we've been trying to work on getting some legislation made that if you murder somebody and you get incarcerated for it, but you don't tell them where that person's body is, that you can never, and a couple states have done this actually, that you can never, ever, ever get out of prison if you do not cooperate in leading the authorities to that victim's body.
Well, the problem is right now is nobody's been charged with anything, so we have to leap that hurdle first.
Yeah.
That we have to leap that hurdle first. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Benny, thank you for being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you, Edward. I really appreciate you taking the time to look into Melissa's story and sharing it with people. I am really grateful for that. And even being reminded of that, there isn't a lot of recent stuff, even on these Facebook pages going around, there's not a lot of recent stuff, activity, from the public on her case. And I feel like this will actually help, to bring more attention and awareness to her case and her story. So thank you for helping to do that.
You're welcome. And that was my February 4th, 2026 interview with Benny, ex-boyfriend of Melissa Trumpy and father of 2 of their children. I thank him for joining me and all of you on this episode. Yes, I know, 3 hours long, but I think this disappearance earned its length. There is no way to cover Melissa's case without discussing the multiple 911 calls, the prior crimes of Derek Hammer, the hostage situation, the charges hanging over Derek's head at the time of the disappearance, the mother changing her story, what the rest of the cast of characters did and said, the GPS tracking, which has to be about the most complete and accurate that we have featured. And after all that, well, before all that, we always have to talk about the missing person herself. So I don't think there's any way the coverage could have been any shorter. But I will admit, all you have to do is listen to any random 20 minutes of that interview to 99.9999% know what happened and why. Unfortunately, what we don't know is where. Where did the killer and his accomplices put her? I have to admit, until that is determined, we should all feel like we've been taken hostage. If you'd like to hear and read more of my in-depth analysis into the disappearance of Melissa Trumpy, go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. Sign up to partake in the Unfound blog. Until then, I leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. I'm Ed Dunsel, and you've been listening to Unfound.